When tech billionaire Dr. Grant Maddox offered a janitor's 8-year-old daughter $100 million to fix what his entire engineering team couldn't, he thought he was making a joke. The cameras were rolling, his company was burning, and little Ivy Johnson, standing in her worn sneakers beside her mother's cleaning cart, was supposed to be the punchline that would salvage his crumbling empire's PR disaster. But in the next 60 seconds, that little girl would do something that would expose not just faulty code, but a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of corporate America, and Maddox's cruel laugh would die in his throat. If you're watching this story unfold, drop a comment with your city below. I want to see how far Ivy's story travels across the world. The 73rd floor of Maddox Tower had floor-to-ceiling windows that made Manhattan look like a kingdom, and Dr. Grant Maddox had always believed that's exactly what it was, his kingdom. At 42, he'd built Apex Automotive AI from a Stanford dorm room idea into a $12 billion empire that promised to revolutionize transportation. Self-driving cars that could think, react, and save lives. That was the pitch. That was the dream he'd sold to investors, governments, and millions of consumers who'd pre-ordered vehicles they believed would change their lives. Today, that dream was dying in real time, broadcast to 4.3 million viewers on 7 different platforms. "Ladies and gentlemen," Maddox said, his voice carrying that practiced blend of confidence and concern that had made him a media darling, "transparency is the cornerstone of innovation. That's why I've invited you all here, virtually and physically, to witness how Apex handles adversity." The boardroom was chaos disguised as professionalism. 37 of the world's top engineers crowded around holographic displays showing cascading red error messages. Laptops overheated. Phones buzzed with texts from lawyers, investors, and journalists who smelled blood in the water. In the corner, a live feed showed the Apex stock price dropping like a stone, down 18% in the last hour alone. Dr. Naomi Reeves, Apex's chief technology officer and the architect of their core AI system, looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and her eyes had the hollow look of someone watching their life's work collapse. "Grant, we need to take the stream down," she said quietly, though her voice carried the edge of desperation. "This is making it worse." "Worse?" Maddox laughed, though it sounded forced even to his own ears. "Naomi, we're in a new era. Hiding problems is what old companies do. We're going to solve this live, show the world that Apex doesn't run from challenges." He gestured broadly to the cameras positioned around the room. "Besides, our competitors are already watching. Toyota's team is probably taking notes. BMW's engineers are laughing. Ford's board is celebrating. We either fix this publicly or we die publicly. At least this way, when we succeed, everyone sees it." What Maddox didn't say, what he barely admitted to himself, was that the company was already dying. 3 months ago, the first accident had occurred. The Apex automotive vehicle, operating in full autonomous mode, had failed to detect a cyclist in Portland. The cyclist survived, but the lawsuit that followed opened the floodgates. Then came Dallas, then Phoenix, then Seattle. Each incident followed the same pattern. The AI system would inexplicably freeze for 2 to 3 seconds, not long enough to seem catastrophic in testing, but plenty long enough to turn a safe situation into a collision. The engineering team had run 10,000 simulations. They'd rebuilt the neural networks from scratch. They'd brought in consultants from MIT, Carnegie Mellon, and Google's former AI division. Nothing worked. The freezing persisted, random and unpredictable, like a ghost in the machine that appeared just often enough to be deadly, but never consistently enough to be diagnosed. And now, with the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration threatening to ground every Apex vehicle in America, with lawsuits climbing past $2 billion, with criminal negligence charges being whispered in legal circles, Maddox had made the ultimate gamble: fix it live, in front of the world, or watch his empire crumble on camera. "Run the Portland scenario again," Naomi instructed her team. On the massive center screen, a simulation loaded, a digital recreation of the intersection where everything had started to fall apart. The Apex vehicle approached. The cyclist entered the frame. And right on cue, at the critical moment when the AI should have braked, the system froze. Error. Priority conflict in decision matrix. Error. Neural pathway timeout. Error. Unable to resolve simultaneous inputs. The room groaned collectively. Someone threw a stylus at their monitor. Another engineer dropped their head into their hands. 12 weeks, said Marcus Wu, the lead systems architect who'd been with Apex since the beginning. 12 weeks, and we're no closer than day one. Grant, I'm telling you, we might need to scrap the entire decision framework and start over. That's 6 years of work, but absolutely not, Maddox cut him off. His jaw was tight. We don't have 6 years. We don't have 6 months. We have about 6 hours before our insurance carriers pull coverage, and then we're not just dead, we're criminally liable. He ran a hand through his carefully styled hair, disturbing it for the first time that day. There has to be something we're missing. Something simple. These systems work perfectly for 3 years. You don't just develop catastrophic flaws overnight. Unless someone sabotaged us, offered Jennifer Park, the cybersecurity lead. I've been saying for weeks. No evidence of external intrusion, Marcus interrupted. We've checked, multiple times. Whatever this is, it's coming from inside our own code. The argument continued, technical jargon flying like artillery fire, and Maddox felt control slipping through his fingers. This was supposed to be his moment of redemption, the brilliant CEO leading his team through crisis, but instead, he was watching his company die in slow motion, broadcast to millions. That's when he saw her. At first, Maddox thought his exhausted mind was playing tricks on him. But no. There, near the back wall by the coffee station, partially hidden behind a cleaning cart, stood a woman in a janitorial uniform. Elena Johnson. He recognized her vaguely. She'd been cleaning this floor for maybe a year. Always quiet. Always invisible, the way the help was supposed to be. But tonight, Elena wasn't alone. Beside her, gripping her hand, stood a little girl. The child couldn't have been more than 8 years old. She wore a faded purple jacket that had clearly been handed down from someone bigger, jeans with patches on the knees, and sneakers that had seen better days. Her hair was pulled back in 2 neat braids, and she had the kind of enormous brown eyes that seemed to take in everything while revealing nothing. And those eyes were locked on the screens. Not locked, studied. The girl wasn't gaping at the chaos like a confused child. She was watching the error messages scroll past with an intensity that made Maddox's skin prickle. "What?" Maddox said loudly, cutting through the technical debate. "Is a child doing in my boardroom?" The room went silent. All heads turned. Elena Johnson's face went pale. "Mr. Maddox, I'm so sorry." "The school called. Ivy was sick. I had no one to watch her, and I couldn't miss work. I told her to wait in the hallway, but nothing," Maddox interrupted. An idea was forming in his mind, a terrible, wonderful, absolutely desperate idea. "You brought your daughter to work during the biggest crisis in company history. Actually, you know what? That's perfect." Naomi shot him a warning look. "Grant, don't." But Maddox was already moving, walking toward Elena and Ivy with the cameras following him. He could see it now, the narrative, the optics. Brilliant CEO in his moment of crisis still takes time to engage with even the janitor's daughter. Humanizing, relatable. And if he played it right, maybe it would buy him some goodwill with the millions watching. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked, crouching down to Ivy's level with a smile that had been practiced in countless investor meetings. The little girl didn't answer immediately. She looked at her mother first, seeking permission. Elena gave a tiny, nervous nod. "Ivy," the child said quietly. "Ivy Johnson." "Ivy? That's a pretty name," Maddox gestured to the chaotic screens behind him. "I bet all this looks pretty confusing, doesn't it? All these smart adults running around trying to fix something very complicated." Ivy's eyes flicked to the screens again, then back to Maddox. "It doesn't look that confusing." The comment was so soft, so matter-of-fact, that Maddox almost missed it. A few engineers chuckled. Marcus Wu shook his head with a tired smile. And that's when Maddox's terrible idea crystallized into something he knew he'd probably regret, but couldn't resist anyway. The cameras were rolling, millions were watching, and he needed something, anything, to change the narrative before Apex Automotive became a cautionary tale studied in business schools. He stood up, spreading his arms wide to address both the room and the cameras. "You know what? I've built this company on the principle that genius can come from anywhere. We've hired from unconventional backgrounds. We've challenged traditional thinking, so let me make a proposition to Ivy here and to everyone watching. Naomi's eyes went wide. Grant, what are you doing? Maddox ignored her. His showman instincts had taken over, the same instincts that had helped him raise $3 billion in venture capital, the same instincts that now screamed this was either the smartest or stupidest thing he'd ever do. Ivy, he said, looking down at the little girl with his most charming smile, my team of engineers, people with PhDs from MIT, Stanford, Carnegie Mellon, they've been trying to fix this problem for 12 weeks. If you can figure out what's wrong with our system, if you can help us fix it, I will personally give you $100 million. The room erupted. Engineers shouted. Naomi looked horrified. Elena's hand flew to her mouth, and somewhere in the building Maddox knew lawyers were probably screaming and scrambling for their phones. But the cameras caught it all. The shock, the audacity, the impossible offer to an 8-year-old girl in a worn purple jacket. Marcus Wu was the first to find words. Grant, this is insane. She's a child. You can't. I can do whatever I want in my own company, Maddox shot back. And right now, what I want is to prove a point. Everyone's so sure that expertise requires decades of credentials. But what if it doesn't? What if fresh eyes, completely uncorrupted by conventional thinking, could see what we've all missed? He was speaking to the cameras now, playing to the audience. Ivy, you've been watching our screens. You said it doesn't look confusing, so tell us. What do you see? The little girl stood frozen, pressed against her mother's leg. Elena was trembling. Mr. Maddox, please, she's just a child. She doesn't know anything about— I see patterns, Ivy said suddenly. The room fell silent again. Maddox blinked. What? Ivy's voice was still quiet, but there was something in it now, a certainty that seemed impossible from someone so young. On the screens, the errors, they're not random, they follow patterns. Jennifer Park, the cybersecurity lead, leaned forward. What kind of patterns? Ivy didn't answer immediately. Instead, she did something that made every engineer in the room uncomfortable. She walked away from her mother, crossed the boardroom floor with small, careful steps, and stopped directly in front of the main holographic display. The massive screen towered over her tiny frame, but she stared up at it without fear, her eyes tracking the cascading red text. Here, she said, pointing, and here, and here. Her small finger traced lines through the air, connecting error messages that seemed unrelated. They repeat. Every 17 seconds. Different words, but the same shape. Naomi moved closer, her professional curiosity overriding her shock. Shape? What do you mean, shape? Ivy frowned, searching for words. Like when you do a word problem in school, and it looks different each time, but it's really the same problem. Different numbers, same question. She pointed again. These errors look different, but they're asking for the same thing, over and over, every 17 seconds. Marcus Wu was already at his laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. Run a temporal analysis, he barked at his team. Flag all decision tree timeouts and cluster them by interval. The room held its breath. On a side monitor, data began to reorganize itself. And there, impossible to miss once someone pointed it out, was a pattern. A repeating cycle of failures, each spaced almost exactly 17 seconds apart, hidden in the noise of thousands of other errors. Jesus Christ, Marcus breathed. She's right. How the hell did we miss this? Because you weren't looking for patterns, Ivy said simply. You were looking for mistakes. The distinction seemed to electrify something in Naomi's mind. She spun to her team. Pull up the core decision matrix, not the user interface, the actual source code. I want to see the priority resolution algorithm. Windows opened across multiple screens. Code scrolled past. Thousands of lines of dense technical programming that represented years of work by dozens of engineers. To most people, it would have looked like incomprehensible gibberish. Ivy studied it for maybe 10 seconds. Then she pointed. There, she said. That symbol is wrong. Every engineer in the room moved closer. Naomi squinted at the line Ivy indicated. That's a semicolon. Standard syntax. There's nothing wrong with— It's in the wrong place, Ivy interrupted quietly. It stops the question too early. So the computer asks part of the question, waits, asks the rest, waits, and gets confused because the answer comes to the wrong part. The room was absolutely silent. Naomi's hands were shaking as she highlighted the line. The semicolon was positioned at the end of a conditional statement, technically correct by any standard syntax rules, but positioned in a way that split a complex decision tree into two parts that evaluated separately instead of together. It's a microsecond delay, Naomi whispered. Less than that. But if it compounds across multiple simultaneous decisions, she was typing furiously now, running simulations. If this creates a queue backup in the priority resolution, if multiple inputs arrive during that split second, the Portland simulation loaded again. Naomi made a single change, moving one semicolon 6 spaces to the right, changing where a single logical statement terminated. The apex vehicle approached the intersection. The cyclist entered the frame. The AI processed, calculated, and smoothly braked. No freeze, no error, just clean, perfect execution. Run it again, Marcus demanded. That could be coincidence. They ran it 20 times, Dallas, Phoenix, Seattle, every scenario that had produced a failure. And with that one tiny change, one punctuation mark moved 6 spaces, the system worked flawlessly. The boardroom erupted in chaos. Engineers shouted in disbelief and excitement. Phones buzzed with messages to team members in other offices. Someone started crying. Naomi just stood there, staring at the screens, looking like someone had punched all the air from her lungs. And Grant Maddox felt something he hadn't felt in 12 weeks. Hope. But also something else. Something cold and uncomfortable. Because a child, a janitor's 8-year-old daughter with no credentials, no training, no right to even be in this room, had just done in 60 seconds what his entire team couldn't do in 12 weeks. The cameras had caught every moment. Maddox forced his face into a smile, though his mind was racing. "Well," he said, his voice carrying across the chaos, "I think that deserves a round of applause." The engineers complied, clapping mechanically, still too stunned to process what had just happened. Elena Johnson looked like she might faint, and Ivy just stood there, small and quiet, watching the green confirmations replace the red errors on the screens. "Ivy," Maddox said, crouching down again, "that was remarkable, truly. But you understand, finding one bug doesn't mean finding all the bugs, right? This system has 17 million lines of code. There could be hundreds of issues like this." Something flickered across Ivy's face, an expression too knowing, too aware for a child her age. "I know," she said softly. "There are more." The room froze again. "What?" Naomi's voice cracked. "There are more," Ivy repeated. "Different patterns. Harder to see, but they're there." She looked up at Maddox with those enormous eyes. "Do you want me to find them?" And here Maddox made his second terrible decision of the night. Because the rational thing, the sane thing, would have been to thank Ivy, send her and her mother home, and have his team investigate the pattern recognition approach she'd revealed. Take the gift she'd given them and use it properly, professionally, without turning a child into a corporate spectacle. But Grant Maddox hadn't built a $12 billion company by being rational. He'd built it by being bold, by taking risks, by understanding that sometimes the biggest wins came from the craziest gambles. And right now, with millions watching, with his company on the edge of collapse, with competitors circling like sharks, right now he needed more than a fix. He needed a miracle. He needed a story so compelling, so unprecedented, that it would completely rewrite the narrative around Apex Automotive. He needed Ivy Johnson. "All right," he said, standing up and addressing the cameras. "Let's make this interesting. Ivy, I'm going to give you and your mom full access to this boardroom and our systems. You'll work with Dr. Reeves and the team. You have 24 hours to find and document every critical bug in our system." Elena finally found her voice. "Mr. Maddox, I appreciate this, but Ivy has school tomorrow, and she's only 8 years old. I'll pay for private tutoring," Maddox interrupted. "The best in the city. And Elena, you'll be on paid leave for the next month, full salary, no matter what happens." He looked directly into the nearest camera. 24 hours. If Ivy can identify the critical flaws in our system, if she can prove this wasn't just luck, I will honor my offer. $100 million. The number hung in the air like a physical thing. But, Maddox continued, and his smile had an edge to it now, if she can't, if this was just a lucky guess, then I'm going to be very disappointed, and I'll make sure everyone knows that this whole thing was a waste of time. That maybe, just maybe, conventional wisdom about expertise and credentials exists for a reason. It was a threat wrapped in a challenge, wrapped in an opportunity. And everyone in the room knew it. Naomi looked furious. Marcus looked sick. Several engineers looked ethically conflicted about what they were witnessing. And Ivy Johnson, 8 years old, wearing a worn purple jacket, standing in a boardroom 73 floors above Manhattan, looked at Grant Maddox with an expression that seemed far too old for her face. "Okay," she said quietly. "I'll try." Elena pulled her daughter close, whispering urgently in her ear, but Ivy shook her head at whatever her mother said. She'd made her choice. Maddox clapped his hands once, loud and sharp. "Excellent. Naomi, get Ivy set up at a workstation. Make sure she has access to whatever she needs. The clock starts now." He checked his watch with theatrical precision. 24 hours. Let's see if genius really can come from anywhere, or if we've all just been part of an interesting statistical anomaly. As the team scrambled to rearrange workstations, as Elena reluctantly let Naomi lead Ivy to a computer terminal, as the cameras continued rolling and social media exploded with reactions, Grant Maddox allowed himself a moment of private calculation. If the girl succeeded, he'd look like a visionary, the CEO who recognized talent in the most unlikely place. Stock prices would recover, lawsuits might be settled, the company would survive. If she failed, he'd look like someone who'd tried everything, even the most unconventional approaches. He'd still have her first discovery to work with, and he'd have a convenient scapegoat, proof that desperation had led him to grasp at straws, but at least he'd tried. Either way, the narrative was shifting. The story was no longer Apex Automotive's fatal flaws. It was becoming, can a child genius save a billion-dollar company? What Maddox didn't consider, what he couldn't possibly have imagined, was that in the next 24 hours, Ivy Johnson wouldn't just find bugs in his code. She would uncover a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of his company. She would expose corruption that had been hidden for 18 months. And she would prove, beyond any doubt, that the real disaster facing Apex Automotive had nothing to do with random errors or statistical anomalies. It had everything to do with deliberate, calculated sabotage by the very people Grant Maddox trusted most. But that realization was still hours away. For now, as the Manhattan night deepened outside those floor-to-ceiling windows, as Ivy Johnson settled into a chair that was too big for her and stared at screens full of code, as Elena Johnson stood nearby with her heart in her throat, and as 4.3 million viewers watched from around the world, for now, everyone believed they were witnessing a simple story about an improbable challenge. No one yet understood they were watching the beginning of the end for everything Grant Maddox had built. The first thing Ivy did was close her eyes. Naomi Reeves watched the little girl settle into the oversized leather chair, watched her small hands rest on the desk's smooth surface, watched her take 3 deep breaths like she was preparing for something much bigger than looking at computer code. Around them, the boardroom had transformed into a war room. Engineers hunched over laptops at every available surface. Coffee cups multiplied like weeds. The wall of screens continued their hypnotic dance of data streams and error logs, bathing everything in that cold blue light that made everyone look slightly unwell. "Ivy," Naomi said gently, pulling up a chair beside her, "before we start, I need you to understand something. What you found earlier, that semicolon placement, that was incredible, truly. But this system is massive. We're talking about years of work by hundreds of people. I don't want you to feel pressured to—" "The patterns are like music," Ivy interrupted, her eyes still closed. "My mom doesn't know I can hear them. When she brings me here at night, when I wait in the hallway, I can hear the servers. They hum. And when something's wrong, the hum changes." Naomi glanced at Elena, who stood a few feet away, looking torn between pride and terror. The janitor nodded slowly. "She's always been like this, since she was 3. Patterns in everything, numbers, sounds, the way light hits things. Her teachers say she's bright, but unfocused. They don't see what I see." "What do you see?" Naomi asked. Elena's voice was barely a whisper. That my daughter sees connections where other people see chaos. Ivy opened her eyes then, and they locked onto the main screen with that same unsettling intensity. Can you show me the errors from the last week? All of them, not just the driving system. Marcus Wu, who'd been listening while pretending not to, looked up sharply. The driving system is what's failing. That's what we need to fix. But you said the driving system worked perfectly for 3 years, Ivy replied, her voice still carrying that strange certainty. Things don't just break. Something makes them break. I want to see what else has been breaking. Naomi felt something click in her mind, the same intuitive leap that had made her a brilliant engineer in the first place, before management responsibilities had dulled her instincts. Pull up the full error database, she instructed her team. Everything logged in the last 12 weeks, across all systems. That's going to be millions of entries, Jennifer Park warned. The file size alone. Do it, Naomi said. While the data compiled, Grant Maddox circulated through the room like a shark, playing to the cameras that continued broadcasting everything. He'd changed his approach now, narrating the scene like a nature documentary. What you're witnessing here is unprecedented in corporate America. Complete transparency. A CEO willing to let a child challenge his entire organization. This is the future of innovation, radical openness, unconventional thinking, expertise from unexpected places. Naomi wanted to throw something at him. This wasn't about innovation or transparency. This was about a desperate man gambling with a little girl's dignity because he'd run out of conventional options. But she kept her mouth shut because arguing with Grant on camera would only make things worse. The data finished loading. Ivy's screen filled with a cascading waterfall of error messages, 12 weeks of system hiccups, failed processes, timeout warnings, and corrupted data packets. It was digital noise, the kind of background static that every large system generated. Most of it was meaningless. Ivy stared at it for exactly 43 seconds. Then she pointed, there and there and there. Her finger moved faster than seemed possible, marking spots on the screen. Those aren't system errors. Those are questions someone asked that they weren't supposed to ask. The room went quiet again. It was becoming a pattern. Ivy would say something impossible, and everyone would stop breathing. Jennifer Park moved closer, her cybersecurity instincts engaged. What do you mean questions someone asked? When the computer doesn't know how to answer something, it makes an error, Ivy explained. But some of these errors are from questions that are too specific. Like if you asked your teacher what page homework was on, that's normal. But if you asked what page homework was on, what time she wrote it, what pen she used, and what she was thinking when she wrote it, that's weird. That's too many questions about one thing. Marcus Wu was already running traces on the entries Ivy had marked. His face went pale. These are database queries, deep ones. Someone was accessing system architecture documentation, pulling schematics, downloading logs of... He stopped, his fingers frozen over his keyboard. Jesus Christ. Someone was mapping our entire system, every component, every connection, every dependency. When? Naomi demanded. Starting 18 months ago, regularly, carefully. Like... Marcus looked up, and his expression made Naomi's stomach drop. Like someone was studying the system to figure out exactly how to break it. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Around the room, engineers exchanged glances. Grant Maddox had stopped his performance for the cameras, his showman's smile faltering. That's impossible, he said, but his voice had lost its confidence. We have security protocols, access logs. If someone was poking around in system architecture, we'd have flagged it. Not if they had authorized access, Jennifer said quietly. She was typing now, running her own analysis. Not if they were senior enough that their queries looked normal. Not if they were smart about spacing them out, making each individual search seem routine. Are you suggesting... Maddox couldn't finish the sentence. I'm suggesting we have a serious problem, Jennifer replied. And it's not just buggy code. Ivy had gone back to studying the screens, seemingly unbothered by the crisis unfolding around her. Can you show me the timeline, she asked, when the questions happened and when the breaks happened? Naomi pulled up a dual visualization, one column showing the suspicious database queries Marcus had identified, another showing the cascade of system failures that had plagued Apex for the last 12 weeks. At first glance, they seemed unrelated. The queries were spread across 18 months. The failures were concentrated in the recent quarter. But Ivy tilted her head, studying the data like it was a puzzle box. They match, she said. Not the times, but the places. See? Every question was about something that broke later, like someone was learning where all the weak spots were. Marcus overlaid the datasets, mapping query targets to eventual system failures. The correlation was undeniable. Every component that had developed critical bugs had been extensively studied months earlier. It was like watching someone case a building before a robbery, noting every lock, every alarm, every guard rotation. This is sabotage, Naomi breathed. Sophisticated, long-term sabotage. Someone spent over a year learning our system inside and out, then systematically introduced flaws designed to cascade at specific stress points. Who? Maddox's voice was sharp now, stripped of its media polish. Who had this level of access? Who would do this? Jennifer was already pulling access logs, cross-referencing the suspicious queries against employee credentials. The list of people with sufficient privileges to execute these searches wasn't long, maybe 30 people in a company of 3,000. Senior architects, team leads, C-suite executives. I need more time to narrow it down, Jennifer said. The queries were executed through several different accounts, which suggests either multiple conspirators or someone who knew how to spoof credentials. But Ivy's right. This wasn't random system degradation. This was engineered failure. Can she find the actual bugs? Maddox asked. Not the pattern, not the theory, the actual code that's been compromised? All eyes turned to Ivy. The little girl was chewing her lower lip, her gaze distant. I can try, she said, but I need to understand what they were trying to break. You can't fix something if you don't know what it's supposed to do. And so began the strangest tutorial any of them had ever witnessed. For the next 3 hours, while cameras rolled and millions watched, Naomi Reeves gave an 8-year-old girl a crash course in autonomous vehicle AI architecture. She explained decision trees and neural networks, sensor fusion, and real-time processing, the 1,000 ways a self-driving system had to evaluate its environment every millisecond. Ivy absorbed it all with frightening speed. She didn't just memorize, she understood. She asked questions that cut straight to the heart of complex issues. She identified assumptions that the engineering team had baked into their thinking years ago and never questioned. Why does the car trust cameras more than radar? She asked at one point. Because visual recognition is more nuanced, Marcus explained. Radar just gives you distance and speed. Cameras can identify what something actually is. But cameras can't see in fog, Ivy countered. And radar can. So why doesn't the car know that? Why doesn't it switch which one it trusts based on what's happening? The question sparked a 40-minute debate among the engineers. It turned out the priority weighting between sensor systems was hard-coded, optimized for ideal conditions but rigid during environmental stress. It wasn't the source of their current crisis, but it was exactly the kind of architectural weakness that Ivy seemed to instinctively identify. By hour 4, she'd found 6 bugs. They weren't the semicolon she'd spotted earlier. These were deeper, more insidious. Conditional statements that evaluated in the wrong order during edge cases. Memory allocation routines that leaked microseconds of processing time during complex scenarios. Priority flags that could be simultaneously set in ways the system couldn't resolve. Each bug by itself would cause minor hiccups, but together, triggered in specific combinations, they created cascading failures that looked random but were anything but. They're like dominoes, Ivy said, drawing connections on a whiteboard that Naomi had pulled over. Her hand could barely reach the top third, so she was using a step stool Elena had found. You push one and it hits another and that hits another, but if you push them in the wrong order, nothing happens. These bugs only matter when they happen together. That's why we couldn't find them, Naomi realized. We were testing components individually, looking for problems in isolation, but these flaws are designed to be harmless unless they interact. Which means whoever planted them understood the system better than we do, Marcus added grimly. They knew exactly how to hide catastrophic failures inside benign code. Grant Maddox had been uncharacteristically quiet for the last hour, watching Ivy work with an expression that cycled between amazement and something darker, something that looked almost like resentment. Now he spoke up. How many more bugs are there? Ivy consulted the notes she'd been making, a strange mix of drawings, numbers, and symbols that seemed to make sense only to her. I found patterns in 37 places, but some of them might be okay. I'd have to check each one to know for sure. 37. Maddox ran his hand through his hair again. It was nearly midnight now, and he looked every day of his 42 years, plus several more. We're 6 hours in. That leaves 18 hours. Can you verify all of them in that time? I can try, Ivy said, but her voice had lost some of its certainty. She was exhausted. Any fool could see it. Her eyes had dark circles under them, and she'd started yawning between explanations. Elena Johnson, who'd been a silent presence for most of the evening, finally stepped forward. She needs to rest. She's 8 years old. She's been up since 6 this morning, and she was sick earlier today. This is... Elena, I understand your concern, Maddox interrupted, his voice carrying that smooth authority that had convinced investors to hand over billions. But we're talking about preventing future accidents, deaths. If Ivy can identify these flaws now, we can save lives tomorrow. Surely that's worth... Worth what? Elena's voice cracked with emotion. Worth exhausting my daughter? Worth putting her on display like a circus act? Mr. Maddox, I appreciate what you're offering, but money isn't worth Ivy's health. Mom, I'm okay, Ivy said quietly, but she swayed slightly as she climbed down from the step stool, and Naomi had to steady her. You're not okay, Elena insisted. You're running on fumes. We're going home. Mrs. Johnson, Maddox began. No. Elena's voice hardened with a strength that surprised everyone in the room. I let you turn my daughter into a spectacle. I let you broadcast her to millions of people. I let her work for 6 hours on something that should be impossible for a child, but I won't let you break her. We're done for tonight. The standoff lasted maybe 5 seconds, but it felt longer. Maddox's jaw worked as he calculated angles, considered arguments, weighed the optics of forcing a single mother to keep her exhausted daughter in his boardroom. Finally, he nodded. Of course. You're right. Ivy needs rest. But Mrs. Johnson, the clock is still running. We have 18 hours left. If Ivy isn't back here by... We'll be back at 7, Elena said firmly. That gives her 7 hours to sleep. It's not enough, but it'll have to be. Make it 6, Maddox countered. 6 hours sleep back here by 6 a.m. That gives us 12 hours to finish the work. Elena looked at her daughter. Ivy nodded, trying to hide another yawn. Okay, Elena said. 6 a.m. But I want it in writing that whether she finishes or not, you're paying for what she's already done. 6 bugs found, 6 hours of work. That's worth something. It's worth everything, Naomi said before Maddox could respond. She pulled out her phone and typed quickly. I'm sending you a contract right now. Consultation fee for tonight's work. $5 million, payable immediately regardless of tomorrow's outcome. And when, Ivy identifies the full scope of flaws, the $100 million stands. Maddox shot Naomi a sharp look, but she met it without flinching. We're not cheating an 8-year-old girl, she said flatly. She's earned this. Fine, Maddox said. Send the contract. But Mrs. Johnson, understand that if Ivy doesn't come back tomorrow, if you decide to walk away from this, the story that gets told won't be brilliant child solves impossible problem. It'll be desperate mother exploits sick daughter for money and fails. I don't want that to be the story. I'm sure you don't either. The threat was naked now, undisguised by corporate speak or media polish. Elena's face went hard, but she didn't respond. She just took Ivy's hand and guided her toward the door. Mrs. Johnson, Naomi called after them. Elena paused. Thank you. What Ivy's done tonight, what she's shown us, it's going to change everything, no matter what happens tomorrow. Elena nodded once, then left with her daughter. The elevator doors closed behind them, and they were gone. The boardroom felt different without them, colder somehow, more corporate. Well, Maddox said, clapping his hands once. We've got 12 hours to either back up a child's theories or prove we've lost our minds. I want 3 teams working overnight. Team 1, verify every bug Ivy identified. Team 2, continue the security investigation. Find out who had access to plant these flaws. Team 3, prepare mitigation strategies for every scenario. If Ivy succeeds tomorrow, I want us ready to implement fixes immediately. If she fails, he paused. If she fails, we'll at least have her initial discoveries to work with. Move. The engineers scattered to their assignments, fueled by coffee and crisis. But Naomi lingered, watching the screens where Ivy's marked patterns still glowed like accusations. "You shouldn't have threatened her mother," she said quietly. "I didn't threaten anyone," Maddox replied. "I stated facts. The media will tell this story one way or another. I'm simply aware of which version serves our interests." "Our interests?" "Grant, a little girl just did in 6 hours what our entire team couldn't do in 12 weeks. She's not a PR opportunity. She's leverage," Maddox interrupted. "Right now we're watching our stock price stabilize because millions of people are invested in this narrative. Can the janitor's daughter save the billion-dollar company? It's compelling, it's emotional, it's exactly what we need. But if it falls apart tomorrow, if she comes back and can't deliver, then we need to control how that failure gets framed." "You're talking about an 8-year-old child," Naomi said. "I'm talking about saving 3,000 jobs," Maddox shot back. "I'm talking about preventing a complete corporate collapse that would devastate everyone who believed in this company. Yes, I'm using Ivy Johnson, but I'm also giving her a chance at $100 million, life-changing wealth her family would never see otherwise. Is that exploitative? Maybe. But it's also the best opportunity that child will ever have." Naomi wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was rationalizing something fundamentally wrong, but she was so tired, and he wasn't entirely incorrect. If Apex Automotive collapsed, thousands of families would suffer. And Ivy had already earned more in one night than her mother would make in a decade of cleaning floors. "I'm going to verify her findings," Naomi said instead, "because if she's right about sabotage, we need to know who did this." She worked through the night while Grant Maddox performed for the cameras and Marcus Wu coordinated the engineering teams. The bugs Ivy had identified were real. Every single one of them checked out. But more disturbing was what Jennifer Park discovered in the access logs. At 3 a.m, Jennifer found Naomi in a conference room, staring at code samples with red-rimmed eyes. "I know who planted the bugs," Jennifer said without preamble. "Or at least I've narrowed it to 3 people. All senior architects who've been with the company since the beginning, all with comprehensive system access, all with the skills to execute this kind of long-term sabotage." "Show me," Naomi demanded. Jennifer pulled up 3 personnel files. Naomi recognized all of them, brilliant engineers she'd worked with for years. The idea that any of them would deliberately sabotage the company seemed impossible. "What's the motive?" Naomi asked. "These people have stock options worth millions. Why would they destroy their own investment?" "That's what I can't figure out," Jennifer admitted. "Unless someone paid them more. Or unless—" She pulled up another window, this one showing trading data. "Look at this. All 3 of them sold their Apex stock 8 months ago, right before the first accident started. But they did it quietly, through different brokers, in small batches that didn't trigger insider trading alerts." "They knew," Naomi breathed. "They knew the system would fail because they built the failures in. They got out before the collapse." "But there's more," Jennifer continued. "The money from those stock sales, it didn't go into normal accounts. It went into shell corporations, which then made investments in—" She pulled up a final document and Naomi felt her blood go cold. "Competitor companies. Specifically, Toyota's autonomous division, BMW's AI research group, and Ford's self-driving initiative. The same companies that have been circling Apex like vultures, waiting for us to fail so they can buy our patents and talent for pennies." "Corporate espionage," Naomi said. "They were plants, paid to sabotage us from the inside." "Or recruited after joining," Jennifer corrected. "But yes, this wasn't just sabotage. This was a coordinated attack by competitors who wanted our technology but didn't want to develop it themselves. Easier to let us do the work than break us and pick up the pieces." Naomi leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. "We need proof, solid, undeniable proof before we accuse anyone. If we're wrong, we're not wrong," Jennifer said. "I've got digital fingerprints on 90% of the compromised code, and when I run them against these 3 people's coding styles, the way they structure loops, the variable names they prefer, even their commenting habits, it's a match. But Naomi, here's the thing. If I'm right about this, if we expose it, it gets worse before it gets better," Naomi finished. "Because then we're not just a company with technical failures. We're a company that got infiltrated and sabotaged. That's a security nightmare. Investors will run, partners will bail. We might collapse anyway. Unless, Jennifer said slowly, we can prove we found it and fixed it. Unless we can show that not only did we identify the sabotage, but we rooted out every piece of compromised code and secured our systems against future attacks. Then maybe, we come out of this stronger. Which means Ivy needs to succeed tomorrow, Naomi said. Because if she can identify every piece of corrupted code, we can rip it all out at once. Clean slate, no hidden time bombs. That's a lot of pressure to put on an 8-year-old girl, Jennifer said quietly. I know, Naomi replied. Believe me, I know. At 6 a.m. sharp, Elena Johnson walked back into the Maddox Tower with Ivy at her side. The little girl had showered and changed clothes, now wearing a bright yellow t-shirt with a unicorn on it and fresh jeans, but her eyes still carried the weight of exhaustion. Elena looked like she'd aged 5 years overnight. The boardroom had transformed again. The overnight teams had organized Ivy's findings into comprehensive charts. Every bug she'd identified had been verified and documented. The security investigation's findings were compiled in a locked folder that only Naomi, Jennifer, and Maddox had access to. And the cameras, of course, were still rolling. Welcome back, Ivy, Maddox said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He looked terrible, like he hadn't slept at all, which he probably hadn't. We've got 12 hours left. Think you can finish what you started? Ivy looked at the screens, then at her mother. Elena squeezed her hand once. The little girl walked to her workstation, climbed onto the chair, and said, I'll try my best. That's all anyone can ask, Naomi said, settling beside her. Ivy, we verified your 6 bugs. They're all real. But I need you to understand something. If the patterns you saw are correct, if there are really 37 compromised areas, then what we're dealing with isn't just mistakes. Someone did this on purpose. Someone wanted this system to fail. Ivy looked at Naomi with those 2 old eyes. I know, she said simply. The patterns are too perfect. Mistakes are messy. These are neat. How does an 8-year-old know the difference? Marcus Wu asked, not unkindly. He joined them, looking haggard but interested. My mom taught me, Ivy said. When I spill juice, it goes everywhere. But when I pour juice carefully into a cup, it goes exactly where I want. These bugs are poured, not spilled. The metaphor was simple but perfect. Naomi felt something catch in her throat. Okay, she said. Then let's find everything that was poured and clean it up. Ready? Ivy nodded. And for the next 6 hours, she worked with a focus that seemed impossible for someone her age. She found bugs in sensor calibration routines. She found bugs in memory management systems. She found bugs in the communication protocols that let different components talk to each other. Each one was subtle, each one was clever, and each one was designed to create chaos when combined with the others. By noon, she'd verified 23 of the 37 patterns. The room watched in real time as an 8-year-old child systematically dismantled a sophisticated corporate conspiracy. And Grant Maddox, watching it all unfold, began to realize that his gamble might actually pay off, but not in the way he'd expected. The 24th bug revealed itself at 12:47 p.m., and it was different from all the others. Ivy had been working steadily through the morning, her small fingers navigating code with increasing confidence, when she suddenly went very still. Her eyes fixed on a section of the communication protocol stack, the deep infrastructure that allowed different parts of the system to exchange data. For almost 2 minutes, she didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at the screen with an intensity that made Naomi uncomfortable. Ivy? Naomi prompted gently. What did you find? This one's bigger, Ivy said quietly. It's not just breaking things. It's taking things. Marcus Wu was at her side in seconds. Taking what? Data? Ivy nodded slowly, her finger tracing lines of code that to most people would have looked like any other routine function. See here? This is supposed to send information between the car's brain and the memory, but there's an extra step, right here. It sends a copy somewhere else first. Jennifer Park nearly knocked over her coffee getting to the workstation. Show me exactly where. Ivy highlighted a dozen lines buried deep in a data routing function. Jennifer's face went white as she read through them. Jesus Christ. This is a data exfiltration routine. It's been copying system telemetry, driving patterns, location data, decision-making logs, and packaging them for external transmission. To where? Maddox demanded, suddenly behind them. Jennifer's fingers flew across her keyboard, tracing the data path. It's encrypted and routed through multiple proxies, but the ultimate destination appears to be… She stopped, her expression somewhere between disbelief and rage. It's going to a server farm in Nevada, registered to a subsidiary of Toyota Advanced Mobility Research. The boardroom erupted. Engineers shouted. Someone swore loudly. Maddox looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. They weren't just sabotaging us, Naomi said, her voice cutting through the chaos. They were stealing everything. Every mile driven by every Apex vehicle, every decision our AI made, every optimization we developed, they've been siphoning it all for 18 months. That's not just corporate espionage, Marcus said. That's theft of trade secrets on a massive scale. That's criminal. That's also leverage, Jennifer added grimly. If they've been collecting our telemetry data, they know exactly how our system works. Better than we do, maybe. They could reverse engineer everything, claim they developed it independently, and we'd have no way to prove otherwise. Grant Maddox had gone very quiet. His face had taken on a waxy quality, and when he spoke, his voice was barely controlled. How much data are we talking about? Jennifer ran calculations. Based on the transmission logs Ivy found, 18 months of continuous collection from our entire fleet. That's approximately 47 petabytes. Every route, every sensor reading, every training iteration, it's literally everything. Can we prove it? Maddox asked. Can we prove Toyota has this data? We can prove it was sent to their servers, Jennifer replied. What they did with it after that, whether they actually accessed it or used it, that's harder. But the routing is clear. This code was designed to funnel our proprietary data directly to our biggest competitor. Maddox turned to the cameras, and Naomi saw calculation flash across his face. This was bigger than system failures. This was an international corporate conspiracy. This was a story that would dominate headlines for months. And if he played it right, Apex Automotive wouldn't just survive. They'd emerge as victims, as heroes who'd uncovered massive fraud. Stop the stream, Maddox said suddenly. Cut the cameras. Now. The production crew looked confused. Sir, we're at peak viewership. Over 8 million people are watching. I said cut them, Maddox snapped. This just became a criminal matter. We can't broadcast evidence of ongoing theft. Legal will have our heads. Kill the feeds. The cameras went dark. The red recording lights blinked off, and suddenly the boardroom felt smaller, more intimate, more dangerous. Ivy, Maddox said, crouching down to her level. That was incredible work, truly remarkable. But I need you to do something else now. I need you to find every piece of code that's been stealing our data. Can you do that? Ivy looked uncertain. I can try. But Mr. Maddox, if someone was stealing things, shouldn't we call the police? We will, Maddox assured her, though his smile had a sharp edge. But first we need to understand exactly what was taken and how. That's where you come in. We need a complete inventory of the compromised code before we involve law enforcement. Otherwise, we're just making accusations without proof. Elena Johnson had been watching from the sidelines, and now she stepped forward. How much longer will this take? Ivy's been working for almost 7 hours today. We have less than 5 hours left on our original timeline, Maddox said. But Mrs. Johnson, what your daughter just discovered changes everything. This isn't just about fixing bugs anymore. This is about documenting a crime. And if we can prove Toyota stole our intellectual property, we're not just talking about $100 million settlements. We're talking about potentially billions in damages. I don't care about billions, Elena said flatly. I care about my daughter. And your daughter is about to become the most famous whistleblower in corporate America, Maddox countered. Mrs. Johnson, please understand what's happening here. Ivy hasn't just saved this company. She's uncovered what might be the biggest case of industrial espionage in tech history. Her name will be in textbooks. Business schools will study this. And yes, she'll get her $100 million, but more than that, she'll have changed an entire industry. Ivy was watching the adults argue, her expression unreadable. Naomi wanted to intervene, wanted to tell Maddox to slow down, to stop turning a child into a symbol before she'd even finished elementary school. But part of her, the part that had spent 12 years building this company, that had poured her life into this technology. Part of her wanted Ivy to keep going, to find every poison line of code, to expose everyone who'd tried to destroy what they'd built. "Mom," Ivy said quietly, "I want to finish. Not for the money, but because—" She struggled for words. "Because it's like someone came into our house and stole things and broke things. And if I can show everyone what they stole and how they broke it, then maybe they'll have to fix it and give it back." Elena closed her eyes for a long moment. When she opened them, they were wet. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, baby. But if you get too tired, we stop. Deal?" "Deal," Ivy agreed. The next 2 hours were some of the most intense Naomi had ever experienced. Ivy found data exfiltration routines hidden in 7 different subsystems. Each one was slightly different. Each one targeted specific types of information. Together, they created a comprehensive espionage network that had been systematically stealing Apex Automotive's most valuable secrets. But it was what Ivy found at 2:34 p.m. that brought everything into sharp, terrible focus. She was examining the authentication system, the code that verified user credentials and granted access to different parts of the infrastructure, when she frowned. "This part is weird," she said. "It's like there are extra users that aren't real users." "Ghost accounts," Jennifer said immediately, moving to investigate. "Administrative access that bypasses normal security. Let me see." What they found made everyone in the room go cold. Hidden in the authentication database were 7 accounts that didn't correspond to any actual employees. Each had full administrative privileges. Each had been created over 2 years ago, and each had been used extensively to access, modify, and extract data from Apex's systems. "These accounts are how they did it," Jennifer said, her voice shaking with anger. "They didn't hack in from outside. They built backdoors into our system from the very beginning. They've had complete access to everything for over 2 years." "Who created these accounts?" Maddox demanded. Jennifer traced the creation logs. The accounts were generated during the initial system build-out. That was the founding team, when we were still in beta, before we had formal security protocols. Marcus Wu had gone very pale. "I was on that team," he said quietly. "So were you, Naomi. So were David Chen, Sarah Martinez, and Robert Kim, James Foster, and Alex Zhang," Jennifer finished. "The 3 people I identified last night as potential saboteurs. But if these backdoors were created that early, during the initial system build, then this conspiracy goes back way further than 18 months. "They've been planning this from the start," Naomi breathed. "They helped us build the company, helped us create the technology, waited until we were valuable enough to be worth stealing, and then systematically destroyed us while funneling everything to our competitors." "Why?" Marcus asked. "Why go through all that effort? Why not just start their own company?" "Because it's easier to steal than to create," Maddox said bitterly, "and less risky. They let us take all the development risk, all the initial failures, all the trial and error. They let us spend billions figuring out what works. And then, when we had something valuable, they took it. Simple, efficient, ruthless." Ivy had been listening to all of this with wide eyes. "Are they going to go to jail?" she asked. "If we can prove they did this, yes," Maddox said. "But Ivy, that's why we need you to keep going. Every piece of evidence you find makes the case stronger. Can you keep looking?" The little girl nodded, though Naomi could see the exhaustion written in every line of her small body. She'd been working for 13 hours over 2 days, with only 6 hours of sleep between them. She should have been in school, playing with friends, being a child. Instead, she was documenting crimes committed by people older and supposedly smarter than she'd ever be. By 4:15 p.m., Ivy had identified 34 of the 37 original patterns. Each one was either a sabotage bug or a data theft routine. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. Kim, Foster, and Zhang hadn't just planted a few problems. They'd woven destruction throughout the entire system architecture, creating a house of cards that was designed to collapse at the worst possible moment, while simultaneously ensuring that everything Apex had learned would end up in their competitors' hands. 3 more, Marcus said, checking the time. 3 patterns left, and we have less than 2 hours until the deadline. The deadline doesn't matter anymore, Naomi said. Ivy's already proven everything. The bugs are real. The theft is real. The conspiracy is real. Grant, we need to call the FBI. Now, before anyone realizes what we've found and tries to destroy evidence. Already done, Jennifer said, holding up her phone. I contacted our legal team an hour ago. They've been in touch with the FBI's cybercrimes division. Agents are already en route to Robert Kim's house. Warrants are being prepared for Foster and Zhang. Maddox looked like he wanted to argue about jurisdiction or protocol, but he just nodded. The corporate showman had been replaced by someone harder, angrier. What about Toyota? Can we prove they knew what they were receiving? That's going to be harder, Jennifer admitted. We can prove data was sent to their servers. We can probably prove Kim, Foster, and Zhang had financial connections to Toyota subsidiaries. But proving Toyota's leadership knew about and authorized the theft? That'll take months of investigation, maybe years. But we can sue them, Naomi said. Civil courts have a lower burden of proof. We can tie them up in litigation for a decade and demand damages that would make them regret ever getting involved in this. That's a conversation for lawyers, Maddox said. Right now I want to finish what we started. Ivy, can you find the last 3 patterns? Ivy rubbed her eyes. She looked so small in that big leather chair, surrounded by adults and screens and the weight of corporate warfare. But she nodded and turned back to the code. The 35th pattern revealed itself at 4:47 p.m. It was hidden in the vehicle-to-vehicle communication system, code that allowed Apex cars to share information with each other about traffic conditions, hazards, and optimal routing. The bug was subtle but devastating. It created false consensus among vehicles, making them trust corrupted data from compromised sources. If someone wanted to cause a massive accident, Marcus said slowly, studying Ivy's findings, this would be how you do it. Feed false information into the V2V network, make all the cars believe something that isn't true, and watch them react to phantom hazards. Did that ever happen? Elena asked, her voice tight with fear. Did anyone die because of this? Not that we know of, Naomi said quickly. This particular bug was dormant, present in the code but not activated. It's like a loaded gun that hasn't been fired yet. Which means they were saving it, Jennifer said grimly. The other bugs created plausible accidents, things that could be blamed on normal system errors. But this one would have caused undeniable catastrophic failures. They were holding it in reserve. For what? Marcus asked. Probably for after the company was sold, Maddox said. Think about it. Create enough problems to tank our value, watch us get acquired for cheap by someone like Toyota, and then trigger this to destroy the entire autonomous vehicle industry. The perfect crime. They get rich from the initial theft, their competitors acquire us at bargain prices, and then the whole market collapses before anyone can challenge their dominance in traditional vehicles. The 36th pattern appeared at 5:23 p.m. It was embedded in the over-the-air update system, the mechanism that allowed Apex to push software updates to vehicles remotely. The bug created a backdoor that would allow anyone with the right credentials to install arbitrary code on any Apex vehicle without leaving traces in the update logs. Remote hijacking, Jennifer breathed. They could have taken control of any car at any time and made it do anything they wanted, and we'd never have known it wasn't just a system glitch. Ivy was swaying in her chair now, fighting to keep her eyes open. Elena was beside her, one hand on her daughter's shoulder, looking torn between pride and guilt. One more, Marcus said. One more pattern, and we have everything. But the 37th pattern was hiding. Ivy searched for 20 minutes, then 30, then 40. The clock ticked past 6 p.m. The original deadline had expired. Technically, Ivy had failed Maddox's challenge, but no one mentioned it. The original parameters felt meaningless now, dwarfed by the magnitude of what they'd uncovered. At 6:34 p.m., Ivy's eyes suddenly widened. There, she whispered. Oh no, there. Everyone crowded around her screen. She was looking at the core operating system, the absolute foundation that everything else ran on top of. And there, hidden in the boot sequence that executed every time a vehicle started, was code that no one on the team recognized. What is that? Naomi asked. Jennifer was already tracing it, following the logic flow. Her face went from confused to horrified to furious in the span of 15 seconds. It's a kill switch, she said. A master kill switch. Someone with the activation codes could send a signal that would permanently brick every single Apex vehicle simultaneously, not just shut them down, actually destroy the operating system beyond recovery. The implications hung in the air like poison gas. Thousands of vehicles rendered permanently inoperable in an instant. The lawsuits would be apocalyptic. The criminal liability would be inescapable. Apex Automotive wouldn't just collapse. It would be destroyed so completely that nothing could be salvaged. That's not sabotage, Marcus said quietly. That's corporate murder. They weren't just trying to damage us. They built in the ability to completely annihilate the company whenever they wanted. Who has the activation codes? Maddox asked, his voice dangerously calm. Jennifer checked the encryption keys embedded in the kill switch code. They're tied to the ghost accounts, Kim, Foster, and Zhang. Any one of them could trigger it. Could they still trigger it? Elena asked, fear sharp in her voice. Right now, could they destroy every car? Theoretically, Jennifer said, but I can lock them out. Give me 5 minutes. I can disable the kill switch and purge the ghost accounts. Once that's done, the threat is neutralized. Do it, Maddox ordered. Do it right now. Jennifer's fingers became a blur. Lines of code scrolled past. Authorization protocols were revoked. Encryption keys were regenerated. And slowly, methodically, she dismantled the architecture of destruction that had been hiding in Apex systems for over 2 years. At 6:52 p.m., she looked up. It's done. The kill switch is disabled. The ghost accounts are deleted. Kim, Foster, and Zhang no longer have any access to our systems, and they can't activate any of the remaining sabotage code. The room seemed to exhale collectively. Naomi felt her knees go weak and had to grab the desk for support. They'd done it. They'd actually done it. They'd found the conspiracy, documented the crimes, and neutralized the threats. And it was all because of an 8-year-old girl who could see patterns where everyone else saw noise. Maddox walked over to where Ivy sat, still slumped in her chair, exhausted beyond words. He crouched down to her level, and for the first time since this whole thing started, his expression was genuinely humble. Ivy, he said quietly, you just saved this company. More than that, you saved thousands of people who would have been hurt if that kill switch had been activated. You found something that no one else could have found, and you did it because you see the world differently than the rest of us. That's a gift. A real gift. Ivy looked at him with eyes that barely stayed open. Do I still get the $100 million? Maddox laughed. A real laugh, not the practiced media sound. Yes. Yes, you absolutely get the $100 million. The deadline doesn't matter. The specific number of patterns doesn't matter. What matters is that you found the truth when no one else could. And you promise no one will get hurt by those broken car parts? Ivy asked. I promise, Maddox said. We're going to fix every single bug you found, remove every piece of compromised code, and rebuild the system from the ground up if we have to. Because of you, we know exactly what's wrong and how to make it right. Ivy nodded slowly. Then she looked at her mother. Can we go home now? I'm really tired. Yes, baby, Elena said, tears streaming down her face. We can go home. But before they could leave, the elevator doors opened and 4 people in FBI windbreakers walked into the boardroom. The lead agent, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and an all-business demeanor, looked around the room and zeroed in on Maddox. Dr. Maddox? I'm Special Agent Sarah Chen, FBI Cybercrimes Division. We have warrants for the arrest of Robert Kim, James Foster, and Alex Zhang on charges of corporate espionage, theft of trade secrets, and conspiracy to commit fraud. We understand you have evidence? We have everything, Naomi said, stepping forward. System logs, exfiltration routines, authentication records, financial connections to competitor companies, and complete documentation of compromised code. It's all here. Agent Chen's eyebrows rose. That's impressively thorough. How long have you been investigating? About 16 hours, Naomi said, give or take. 16 hours? Agent Chen looked skeptical. To uncover and document a conspiracy that, according to your legal team, has been active for over 2 years? How is that possible? Naomi gestured to Ivy, who was holding her mother's hand and trying not to fall asleep standing up. That little girl right there. She found patterns in our code that everyone else missed, patterns that revealed the entire conspiracy. Agent Chen stared at Ivy for a long moment. Then she looked back at Naomi. A child did this? An 8-year-old child, Marcus confirmed. We know how it sounds, but I've been verifying her findings all day. Every single thing she identified checks out. She's the reason we know any of this. Agent Chen approached Ivy slowly, like someone approaching a phenomenon they didn't quite understand. What's your name, honey? Ivy Johnson, the little girl said quietly. Ivy, I'm Agent Chen. I investigate bad people who do bad things with computers, and from what I'm hearing, you might be the best investigator I've ever met. How did you figure all this out? Ivy shrugged. I just looked for patterns, things that repeated, things that didn't belong. My mom always says if something seems wrong, it probably is wrong. So I looked for all the wrong things, and I found them. Agent Chen smiled, a genuine smile that softened her professional severity. Your mom is very smart, and so are you. She straightened up, addressing the room. All right, here's what's going to happen. We'll need copies of all your evidence, documented with timestamps and chain of custody information. We've already apprehended Robert Kim. James Foster and Alex Zhang are being picked up as we speak. Based on what you're telling me, this is going to be a major case, potentially the biggest corporate espionage prosecution in the last decade. What about Toyota? Maddox asked. Can you investigate their involvement? That's complicated, Agent Chen admitted. They're a foreign corporation with operations in multiple countries. If their leadership in Japan authorized this, that creates international jurisdiction issues. But we can certainly investigate their American subsidiaries and any individuals who were involved. It'll take time, but if there's evidence of conspiracy, we'll find it. We have 18 months of data theft, Jennifer said. 47 petabytes sent directly to Toyota's servers. If that's not evidence of conspiracy, I don't know what is. That's a good start, Agent Chen agreed. We'll be in touch. Dr. Maddox, I'll need you and your team to remain available for interviews over the next few weeks. And Ivy, she crouched down again. You might need to talk to some people about what you found. Not right now because you look exhausted, but eventually, is that okay? Ivy looked at her mother, who nodded. Okay, Ivy said. But can it wait until after I sleep? I'm really, really tired. It can definitely wait, Agent Chen said gently. You go home and rest. You've earned it. As the FBI agents began the process of securing evidence and documenting the scene, Elena finally managed to extract Ivy from the boardroom. Naomi walked them to the elevator, her emotions a tangled mess of exhaustion, relief, and something that felt like awe. Mrs. Johnson, Naomi said as they waited for the elevator, I don't know how to thank you. If you hadn't brought Ivy here, if you hadn't let her try. I didn't let her do anything, Elena interrupted quietly. I couldn't stop her. From the moment she saw those screens, she wanted to help. That's just who she is. She sees problems and wants to fix them. She looked down at her daughter, who was practically asleep on her feet. I just hope this doesn't break her. All this attention, all this pressure, she's still just a little girl. We'll protect her, Naomi promised. I'll make sure of it. No media interviews without your explicit permission. No exploitation. Ivy helped us, and we're going to help her. Whatever she needs, education, resources, space to just be a kid, we'll provide it. Elena's eyes filled with tears again. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for seeing her as more than just a tool, Naomi finished. Mrs. Johnson, your daughter is extraordinary. Not because of what she can do for us, but because of who she is. That combination of brilliance and compassion, that's rare. That's special. And yes, we're grateful she helped us. But more than that, I'm grateful I got to witness her gift. The elevator arrived. Elena guided Ivy inside, and the little girl turned to give one last sleepy wave before the doors closed. Naomi stood there for a long moment, staring at the closed elevator doors, feeling like she'd just witnessed something that would reshape how she thought about intelligence, expertise, and the places where real genius could be found. When she returned to the boardroom, Grant Maddox was standing at the windows, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. The cameras were still off. The FBI had taken over one corner of the room, and the engineers were beginning to compile everything into a comprehensive report. "We're going to survive this," Maddox said without turning around. "Not just survive. We're going to come back stronger. The story is perfect. Corporate conspiracy uncovered by unlikely hero. David versus Goliath. Innovation threatened by greed but saved by pure talent. The media will eat it up."
"Grant," Naomi said carefully, "Ivy is not a story. She's a child." "She's both," Maddox replied, finally turning to face her. "And we need to be smart about how we handle this. The right narrative will protect her and help us. The wrong narrative will tear her apart and destroy us. So we control the story. We make sure everyone understands that Ivy is a hero, that we treated her fairly, and that everything that happened here was about protecting people, not just protecting profits." Naomi wanted to argue, but she couldn't. He wasn't entirely wrong. The world was about to learn about Ivy Johnson, and how that story was told would determine everything: how she was treated, how the company was perceived, how the conspiracy was understood. "Then we better make sure it's the truth," Naomi said. "No embellishment, no exaggeration, just what actually happened. A brilliant child saw what we couldn't see, and she had the courage to speak up, even when nobody had any reason to listen to her."
Maddox smiled slightly. "That's pretty good. Mind if I use that?" "It's not a line, Grant," Naomi said. "It's just the truth." "The truth," Maddox repeated, as if testing the word. "Yeah, maybe that's radical enough." Outside the windows, the sun was setting over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Somewhere in that vast city, Ivy Johnson was finally going home, probably already asleep in her mother's arms. She had no idea yet how completely she'd changed everything, how her name would be in headlines tomorrow, how her gift for seeing patterns would make her famous, sought after, studied. But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight, an 8-year-old girl had saved a billion-dollar company, exposed a massive conspiracy, and proven that expertise could come from the most unexpected places, if people were willing to listen. And then the alarms started screaming. It was 7:23 p.m. when every monitoring system in the Apex network lit up red simultaneously. Naomi was still in the boardroom reviewing evidence documentation with the FBI when her phone began vibrating with such intensity it fell off the desk. Marcus Wu's laptop emitted a harsh klaxon that made everyone jump, and on the wall of screens that had displayed Ivy's pattern discoveries just minutes ago, a new message appeared in letters 2 feet tall. "Unauthorized system access detected, multiple breach points, emergency protocols activated." "What the hell?" Grant Maddox spun from the windows. "Jennifer, I thought you locked them out. I thought the ghost accounts were deleted." Jennifer Park was already at her workstation, her fingers moving so fast they blurred. "They are deleted. These aren't coming from the ghost accounts. This is—" She stopped, her face going pale. "Oh God, this is coming from inside the corporate network. Someone physically here, in this building, is trying to access the vehicle fleet." Agent Chen was beside her instantly. "Can you trace the location?" 62nd floor, Jennifer said. "Server room 3. But that's impossible. That room requires biometric access. Only 12 people in the company have clearance, and I can see from the logs that none of them are—" She stopped again, eyes widening. "The logs are being altered in real time. Someone's rewriting the access history as they go." Marcus was pulling up building schematics. "Server room 3 houses the backup systems, redundant controls for the vehicle fleet in case primary systems fail. If someone gets root access there, they could bypass everything Jennifer just locked down." "They're going for the kill switch," Naomi realized, ice flooding her veins. Kim, Foster, and Zhang must have had a contingency plan. If they couldn't activate it remotely, they'd do it manually. "But we arrested Kim," Agent Chen said. "Foster and Zhang are in custody by now. I got confirmation 10 minutes ago." "Then someone else," Maddox said. "A 4th conspirator we didn't know about." Jennifer was trying to lock down the server room remotely, but whoever was inside was good, frighteningly good. Every security protocol she activated, they bypassed. Every access point she closed, they found another route. It was like watching 2 expert chess players, except one of them was trying to destroy everything Apex had built. "Can you shut down the whole floor?" Agent Chen demanded. "Cut power. Seal the doors, trap them inside. Not without potentially corrupting active driving systems, Marcus said. We have 1,400 vehicles on the road right now. If we hard crash the backup servers, their fail-safes might interpret it as a critical failure and force emergency stops. Cars would just stop, middle of highways, intersections, wherever they are. Better than activating the kill switch, Maddox shot back.
Is it? Naomi asked quietly.
Grant, emergency stops on 1,400 vehicles right now during evening rush hour in multiple cities.
How many people die from the collisions that would cause? The question hung in the air like a guillotine blade. They were trapped between two catastrophic choices: risk whatever the intruder was trying to do, or guarantee chaos by forcing a system-wide shutdown. How long until they reach the kill switch activation? Agent Chen asked. Jennifer checked her screens. They're through the first 3 security layers. There are 5 more before they can execute any fleet-wide commands. At their current pace, 4 minutes. Maybe 5. Can we get physical security there faster? Agent Chen was already on a radio, calling for backup. Building security is 8 minutes out from that floor, Maddox said. The elevator systems are keyed to prevent rapid floor changes, safety protocol after 9/11. Even override takes time. Then we go, Agent Chen said. My team and building security. Can you guide us remotely? Jennifer nodded. I'll stay in your ear the whole way, but Agent Chen, whoever this is, they're good enough to crack our best encryption in real time. They're not going to surrender easily. Neither are we, Agent Chen replied grimly. She was already moving toward the elevator, her 3 fellow agents following. Dr. Maddox, I need your authorization to use whatever force is necessary to protect those servers. You have it, Maddox said without hesitation. Do whatever you need to do. The agents disappeared into the elevator. The doors closed. And in the boardroom, the remaining team watched helplessly as the intrusion continued, layer after layer of security falling like dominoes. Who else could it be? Naomi asked, running through possibilities. We identified Kim, Foster, and Zhang. We traced their access patterns, their ghost accounts, their financial connections. If there was a 4th person, there, Marcus interrupted, pointing at the access logs Jennifer had pulled up. Look at the coding style. The way they're structuring their bypass commands, those variable names, that commenting format. That's David Chen's style, Jennifer breathed. He was one of the original founders, one of the people we trusted absolutely. David Chen, brilliant, quiet David Chen, who'd been with Apex since day 1, who'd helped write the core architecture, who'd been at every critical meeting, every major decision point, who'd had access to everything. He sold his stock 8 months ago, too, Naomi remembered suddenly. I saw it in the quarterly filings, but didn't think anything of it. He said he was diversifying his portfolio. He was getting out before the crash, Marcus said bitterly, just like the others. How did we miss him? Because he was smarter, Jennifer said, her voice tight with anger. Kim, Foster, and Zhang left digital fingerprints on the sabotage code. But Chen, he was always the most meticulous coder. He probably wrote the infrastructure that the others used to plant their bugs. He stayed clean, stayed in the background, let the others take the risks while he... A new alarm cut her off. On the screens, the 4th security layer collapsed. 3 minutes, Jennifer said. He's accelerating. He knows we're onto him. Maddox grabbed his phone. I'm calling him. Maybe I can talk him down. Buy us time. He dialed. The call connected. And David Chen's voice came through the speaker, calm and almost pleasant. Hello, Grant. I was wondering when you'd figure it out. David, what are you doing? Maddox tried to sound reasonable, authoritative, the CEO voice that had convinced so many people to follow his vision. We can work this out. Whatever you think you're accomplishing, I'm accomplishing exactly what I set out to do 3 years ago, Chen interrupted. I'm destroying this company and everything it represents. You know what the funny thing is, Grant? You never even noticed when I started. You were too busy playing visionary, too busy selling dreams to investors who didn't understand the technology. You left the actual work to us, and we used that freedom to build your destruction right into the foundation. Why? The question came from Naomi, who'd moved close enough to hear. David, we built this together. We believed in this. Why would you sabotage everything we worked for? There was a pause. When Chen spoke again, his voice had lost its pleasant tone.
Because you were willing to cut corners, Naomi. All of you. When I raised concerns about safety protocols, about insufficient testing, about rushing to market before the system was truly ready, you overruled me. Every time. Grant wanted his IPO. The board wanted their returns. And you, Naomi, you convinced yourself that good enough was actually good enough. That's not fair, Naomi protested. We did years of testing. We followed every regulation. We followed the minimum regulations. Chen cut her off. We did exactly enough testing to get approval, not enough to ensure safety. And I watched for 2 years as we prepared to put thousands of people into vehicles controlled by AI that I knew had fundamental flaws we were choosing to ignore. So I made a decision. If you were going to build something dangerous, I was going to make sure it failed before people died. People almost died anyway, Marcus said hotly. Your bugs caused accidents, real accidents, with real injuries. Minor injuries, Chen replied. Carefully calibrated failures that exposed problems without causing deaths. I ran thousands of simulations to find the exact breaking points that would trigger accidents but not fatalities. Every bug I planted was designed to fail safely, to stop cars, to trigger warnings, to force recalls. Not to kill people. You're insane, Maddox said flatly. I'm practical, Chen countered, and I'm about 10 seconds away from teaching you a lesson about the dangers of valuing profit over safety. Because I'm going to activate the kill switch now. I'm going to brick every Apex vehicle currently on the road. And when those cars stop functioning, when thousands of people are stranded, when your company faces billions in damages, when criminal charges start flying, maybe then you'll understand what happens when you prioritize speed over safety. The fifth security layer fell. Jennifer was typing frantically, trying to throw up new barriers, but Chen was inside the system now, navigating with the confidence of someone who'd designed every defense he was now bypassing. David, please, Naomi tried. You're right, we made mistakes. We rushed things. But killing the company doesn't fix that. It just destroys everything and helps no one. It helps the next company, Chen said. The next group of engineers who think they can take shortcuts. Because they'll see what happened to Apex, and they'll be more careful. They'll prioritize safety. They'll do it right. He was through the sixth layer. One more, and he'd have access to fleet-wide commands. Jennifer estimated 30 seconds until he could trigger the kill switch, and then, impossibly, a small voice came through the building's intercom system. Mr. Chen, it's Ivy. Everyone in the boardroom froze. On the screens, Chen's intrusion attempts paused. Ivy? Chen's voice carried genuine surprise. How are you? Where are you? I'm in the security office on 60, Ivy's voice said. She sounded tired but alert. My mom forgot her purse when we left, so we came back. The security guard let me use the microphone when the alarm started. He said someone was trying to break the computers. There was a long silence. Jennifer frantically traced the intercom connection. Yes, it was really coming from the 60th floor security station, and the security cameras showed Elena Johnson standing next to her daughter, looking terrified, while a confused guard tried to figure out what was happening. Ivy, Chen said slowly. You should go home. This doesn't concern you. But you're trying to break all the cars, Ivy said. I heard you talking. You want to turn them off because you think they're dangerous. But Mr. Chen, I found all the dangerous parts already. I found all your bugs and your patterns and your broken pieces. Dr. Reeves and Ms. Park are fixing them right now. So if you break the cars, you're breaking the fixed cars, not the broken ones. Another pause. On the screens, Chen's intrusion had completely stopped. You found all of them? Chen asked. All 37? Yes, Ivy said. And I understand why you made them. You were trying to show everyone that the cars weren't safe yet, like when I got sick last month and I didn't want to tell my mom because I thought she'd be mad, but she said it was better to tell her so she could help me feel better. You were trying to help the company feel better by showing them they were sick. That's... Chen's voice caught. That's actually a very good analogy, Ivy. But Mr. Chen, the company knows it's sick now. Everyone knows. The FBI is here and everything. So you don't need to break the cars to prove they need fixing. They're already getting fixed. If you break them now, you're just hurting people who didn't do anything wrong. People who are driving home to their families and their kids and their dinners. In the boardroom, no one dared to breathe. Naomi felt tears on her cheeks and didn't bother wiping them away. This 8-year-old child, exhausted from a day of saving a company that had exploited her gifts, was now trying to save it again, not with pattern recognition or technical brilliance, but with simple, devastating compassion. "Ivy," Chen said, and his voice was thick with emotion. "Do you know why I did this? Why I spent 3 years sabotaging my own company?" "Because you cared about people," Ivy said simply. "You cared about them so much that you broke things to keep them safe. My mom does that sometimes. She hides the sharp knives so I don't cut myself. But Mr. Chen, if you cared about people, you should know that there are 1,400 people in cars right now. And if you turn off their cars in the middle of the road, some of them might get hurt. Maybe really hurt. Is that what you want?" The silence stretched so long that Naomi thought Chen had disconnected. But then he spoke, and his voice was barely a whisper. "No, that's never what I wanted." "Then don't do it," Ivy said. "Come out of the computer room. Talk to Agent Chen. She's really nice, even though she looks scary. Tell everyone why you did what you did. Maybe they'll understand. Maybe they'll make the cars safer because of you. But if you break everything now, all anyone will remember is that you hurt people. And I don't think that's what you want to be remembered for." Another endless pause. Then, on the security feeds that Jennifer had pulled up, they saw a figure emerge from server room 3. David Chen looked exactly as he always had. Slight build, glasses, utterly normal, except for the defeat written in every line of his body. Agent Chen and her team, who'd been positioned outside the server room, moved in immediately. Chen didn't resist. He simply raised his hands and let himself be handcuffed while Agent Chen read him his rights. On the screens in the boardroom, the intrusion alarms went silent. The red warnings faded to yellow, then green. The kill switch remained dormant. The 1,400 vehicles on the road continued safely to their destinations, their passengers completely unaware of how close they'd come to disaster. Jennifer sagged in her chair. Marcus dropped his head into his hands. Maddox looked like he'd aged 10 years in the last 10 minutes, and Naomi grabbed her phone and called down to the security office. "Mrs. Johnson, it's Naomi Reeves. Is Ivy okay?" "She's—" Elena's voice was shaking. "Dr. Reeves, I don't understand what just happened. The security guard said there was an emergency, and Ivy just started talking into the microphone, and your daughter just saved 1,400 lives," Naomi said, "and quite possibly prevented the largest vehicular disaster in modern history. Can you bring her back up to 73? I think she deserves to see how this ends." 10 minutes later, Ivy and Elena stepped out of the elevator into a boardroom full of people who stood and applauded. It wasn't the polite applause of corporate meetings. It was genuine, overwhelming, the kind of recognition that came from people who understood they'd just witnessed something extraordinary. Ivy looked confused by the reaction. She pressed closer to her mother, overwhelmed by the attention. Grant Maddox crossed to them. And for the first time since this entire ordeal began, there was no calculation in his expression, just genuine gratitude mixed with something that looked like shame. "Ivy," he said quietly, "twice now you've saved this company. The first time with your brilliant mind, the second time with your good heart. I don't know how to thank you for that." "You don't have to thank me," Ivy said. "You just have to fix the cars for real, not fake fixing, real fixing, so people are safe." "We will," Maddox promised. "I swear to you, we will. Every bug you found, every flaw you identified, we're going to repair them all. And we're going to implement new safety protocols, new testing standards, everything that David Chen was right about. We're going to do this properly." Naomi stepped forward. "Ivy, there's something else you should know. When you talked to David Chen, when you stopped him from activating the kill switch, the system logs show that he was literally one keystroke away from executing the command. One keystroke. If you'd started talking 5 seconds later, if you'd said anything different, he might have gone through with it. Do you understand what that means?" Ivy shook her head. "It means you have an incredibly rare gift," Naomi said gently. "Not just seeing patterns in code, but seeing patterns in people, understanding what they need to hear, what they need to feel. David Chen spent 3 years planning this sabotage, and you undid it with 2 minutes of talking to him like a human being. That's—" She had to stop. overcome with emotion.
That's extraordinary. I just told him the truth, Ivy said, that hurting people is bad even if you're trying to help people. That's not extraordinary. That's just true. From the mouths of babes, Marcus Wu said softly. Agent Chen returned to the boardroom then, looking exhausted but satisfied. David Chen is in custody. He's already talking, waiving his right to remain silent, apparently eager to explain his motivations. He's confirming everything about the conspiracy with Kim, Foster, and Zhang, providing details about Toyota's involvement, the whole operation. She looked at Ivy. He also said to tell you thank you. He said you reminded him why he became an engineer in the first place, to protect people, not to punish them. Is he going to jail? Ivy asked. Almost certainly, Agent Chen said. What he did was illegal, regardless of his motivations, but his cooperation might earn him a reduced sentence. And honestly, his testimony about Toyota's involvement in the conspiracy is going to be devastating for them. We're talking about potential criminal charges against their executives, civil damages that could run into the tens of billions. This is going to reshape the entire autonomous vehicle industry. Good, Elena said firmly. It was the first thing she'd said since returning to the boardroom. Companies shouldn't be allowed to steal from each other and hurt people just to make money. Someone should hold them accountable. Someone will, Agent Chen assured her. And it's thanks to your daughter that we have the evidence to do it. Over the next hour, as the immediate crisis faded into the exhausting work of documentation and legal coordination, the full picture of what had happened began to emerge. David Chen had indeed been the architect of the conspiracy. He'd recruited Kim, Foster, and Zhang by appealing to their concerns about Apex's safety standards, concerns that, Naomi had to admit, were legitimate. Together, they'd spent 3 years building an elaborate scheme that was equal parts sabotage, theft, and what Chen insisted was a desperate attempt to force accountability. The Toyota connection ran deep. Chen had initially approached them with concerns about Apex's rush to market, hoping to partner with a more safety-conscious company. Instead, Toyota had seen an opportunity. They'd paid Chen and his co-conspirators millions to not just sabotage Apex, but to steal every piece of proprietary technology they'd developed. The plan had been to let Apex collapse under the weight of its failures, then buy the company's assets at bankruptcy prices while using the stolen data to accelerate their own autonomous vehicle program. It was sophisticated corporate warfare dressed up as whistleblowing. And it had almost worked. The ironic thing, Naomi said to Marcus as they reviewed the timeline, is that Chen was right about some of it. We did rush, we did cut corners, we prioritized market advantage over comprehensive testing. He was trying to tell us that for years, and we didn't listen. So he decided to force us to listen, Marcus said, by nearly destroying us. And Ivy stopped him, Naomi said, twice. First by finding the flaws he planted, then by reaching the part of him that still cared about protecting people. She shook her head in wonder. An 8-year-old child succeeded where our entire corporate structure failed. She found the truth in the code and the truth in Chen's heart. What does that say about us? That we need to hire better, Marcus said dryly. Then, more seriously, or maybe that we need to remember what Ivy somehow never forgot. That technology is supposed to serve people, not profit. That safety isn't a checkbox, it's a commitment. That the smartest solution isn't always the one with the most credentials behind it. At 9:47 p.m., Grant Maddox called everyone together for what he clearly intended to be a formal statement. The cameras had been turned back on, the live stream restored, and millions of viewers around the world were tuning in to see the resolution of the story that had captivated them for the last 2 days. Ladies and gentlemen, Maddox began, you've been witnessing something unprecedented. A complete, unfiltered look at a corporate crisis and its resolution. What started as a technical failure revealed a massive criminal conspiracy. What could have been a story about corporate collapse became a story about accountability, courage, and the power of unconventional thinking. He gestured to Ivy, who was sitting in her oversized chair looking small and exhausted but alert. This young lady, Ivy Johnson, did something that our entire engineering team couldn't do. She found patterns where we saw noise. She identified sabotage where we saw bugs. And most importantly, she stopped a catastrophe by remembering something we'd all forgotten.
That behind every line of code, every system, every vehicle, there are people whose lives depend on us getting this right. Maddox's voice had lost its corporate polish. He sounded genuinely humble, genuinely chastened. I'm going to make a commitment right now, in front of millions of witnesses. Apex Automotive is going to rebuild from the ground up. Every vehicle currently on the road will be recalled for comprehensive safety inspections. Every line of code will be audited by independent security experts. We're going to implement the safety protocols that David Chen tried to tell us we needed years ago. And we're going to create an oversight board that includes not just engineers and executives, but safety advocates, ethicists, and regular people who understand that innovation without responsibility is just recklessness.
He paused, letting that sink in. We're also going to honor our commitment to Ivy, $100 million, payable immediately, for her work in identifying the flaws in our system and preventing a disaster. But more than that, we're establishing the Ivy Johnson Foundation for Technology Safety, an independent organization funded with an additional $200 million whose mission will be to identify and address safety concerns in emerging technologies before they cause harm. Naomi felt her eyebrows rise. She hadn't known about the foundation. Neither had anyone else in the room, judging by their reactions. But it was a smart move, turning Ivy from a symbol of corporate desperation into a symbol of corporate responsibility. And if Maddox was serious about funding it properly, it could actually do real good. Finally, Maddox said, and now he looked directly at the cameras. I want to apologize to everyone who trusted us with their safety, who believed in our vision, who invested in our company. I'm sorry. We failed you. Not because our technology was fundamentally flawed, but because we allowed profit and pride to override caution. That changes now. We will earn back your trust by deserving it. It was a good speech, maybe even a great one. And the fact that it was at least partly sincere made it more powerful. When Maddox finished, he looked at Ivy. Do you have anything you'd like to say? Ivy considered for a moment. Then, in her quiet voice that somehow carried perfectly in the silent room, she said, I think people should always tell the truth about when things are broken. And other people should always listen when someone says something is broken. Because if you don't listen until something really bad happens, then it's too late to fix it the easy way. You have to fix it the hard way, and that's sad for everyone. Out of the mouths of babes indeed. The live stream ended shortly after that. The cameras were finally, mercifully turned off. And Ivy Johnson, 8 years old and exhausted beyond measure, finally got to go home. As Naomi watched them leave, Ivy holding her mother's hand, Elena with one arm protectively around her daughter's shoulders, she thought about everything that had happened over the last 2 days. A conspiracy uncovered. A company saved. A child thrust into circumstances no child should have to face, and lessons learned that should have been obvious from the start. Do you think she'll be okay? Marcus asked quietly, standing beside her. I don't know, Naomi admitted. This kind of attention, this kind of pressure, it changes people. And she's so young. But you know what? She has Elena. And if her mother is half as strong as she seems, Ivy will be protected from the worst of it. We should make sure of that, Marcus said. We owe her that much. We owe her everything, Naomi corrected. And we're going to spend a long time making sure she gets it. Outside the windows of Maddox Tower, New York City sparkled with its million lights, each one representing lives being lived, choices being made, consequences unfolding. Tomorrow, the world would wake up to headlines about Apex Automotive, about Ivy Johnson, about corporate espionage and unlikely heroes. But tonight, a little girl who'd seen too much and done too much was finally going to sleep. And somewhere in the city, David Chen sat in a federal holding cell, probably wondering how his carefully constructed plan to force accountability had been undone by a child's simple faith that people could still choose to do the right thing. The answer, Naomi thought, was simpler than any of them wanted to admit. Ivy had succeeded where they'd all failed because she'd never forgotten the first principle that should have guided everything they did. The technology was supposed to serve people, not the other way around. It was 3 weeks before Naomi saw Ivy again, and the world had changed completely in that time. The headlines had been relentless. Every major news outlet ran the story, some version of 8-year-old genius exposes billion-dollar conspiracy,
dominated the news cycle for days. Ivy's photo was everywhere, that image of her in her worn purple jacket standing beside the massive screens in the Maddox Tower boardroom. The story had everything the media loved: corporate intrigue, unlikely heroes, David versus Goliath, and a narrative arc that felt almost too perfect to be real. Except it was real. Painfully, undeniably real. The FBI had moved quickly. Robert Kim, James Foster, and Alex Zhang were all facing federal charges for conspiracy to commit corporate espionage, theft of trade secrets, wire fraud, and a dozen other counts that would likely keep them in prison for decades. David Chen had pleaded guilty to similar charges but was cooperating extensively with prosecutors, providing detailed testimony about Toyota's involvement in the conspiracy. His lawyers were arguing for leniency based on his stated motivations about safety, an argument that was gaining surprising traction in some circles, much to the outrage of others. Toyota's American division was in complete chaos. 7 executives had been placed on administrative leave. 2 had resigned. The Japanese headquarters was conducting its own internal investigation while simultaneously denying any knowledge of the theft, claiming that if data was received from Apex Systems, it must have been the work of rogue employees acting without authorization. No one believed them. The civil lawsuits had already begun, with Apex seeking damages that some analysts estimated could reach $40 billion. And through it all, Ivy Johnson had disappeared from public view. Elena had refused every interview request, turned down every talk show invitation, declined every book deal and movie option. She'd taken the $5 million consultation fee that Naomi had promised and moved her daughter out of their small apartment in Queens to a house in Westchester with a yard and a good school district, and most importantly, privacy. The $100 million payment was still being finalized, lawyers being lawyers. The paperwork was complex and would take months to complete, but Elena had insisted they didn't need it immediately. The $5 million was more money than she'd ever imagined having. The $100 million, when it came, would be put into trusts and investments that would ensure Ivy's future without drowning her present in wealth she couldn't possibly understand. Naomi had respected the family's privacy, even though she desperately wanted to check on Ivy, to make sure the little girl was processing everything okay, to ensure she wasn't being crushed under the weight of sudden fame. But Elena had been clear. They needed time to be a family again, away from cameras and questions and the relentless machinery of media attention. So Naomi threw herself into the work of rebuilding Apex Automotive, and there was so much work to be done. The recall had been comprehensive. Every vehicle grounded for 2 weeks while teams of engineers performed complete system audits. The compromise code that Ivy had identified was purged and replaced. New security protocols were implemented. Independent testing was mandated. And slowly, painfully, carefully, the fleet was returned to service with safeguards that should have been there from the beginning. The company's stock had initially crashed when the conspiracy was revealed, dropping 40% in a single day. But then something unexpected happened. As the scope of Apex's response became clear, the commitment to safety, the transparency about what had gone wrong, the establishment of the Ivy Johnson Foundation, investors began to see the company not as damaged goods but as an organization that had learned a crucial lesson and emerged stronger for it. The stock began to recover. Partners who'd threatened to abandon ship decided to stay. New contracts were signed. And Grant Maddox, humbled but still ambitious, began talking about Apex 2.0, a company rebuilt on principles of safety and accountability rather than just innovation and speed. David Chen's testimony had been devastating for Apex's reputation, but ultimately helpful for its future. He'd confirmed that his safety concerns had been legitimate, that the company had prioritized deadlines over testing, that warnings had been ignored in the rush to market. His revelations forced uncomfortable conversations that the industry had been avoiding for years. Were autonomous vehicles being rushed into production before they were truly ready? Were companies cutting corners to beat competitors? Were regulators equipped to properly oversee this technology? The answer to all 3 questions appeared to be yes, and that admission, painful as it was, created space for real change. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration announced new oversight protocols. Industry-wide safety standards were proposed, and Apex, having been forced to confront its failures publicly, became an unexpected advocate for stricter regulation, a position that would have been unthinkable 6 months earlier. Naomi had been promoted to Chief Safety Officer, a newly created position that reported directly to the board rather than to Maddox. Her job was to be the company's conscience, the voice that could say no to executive pressure, the guardian of principles over profit. It was an enormous responsibility and one she took seriously, knowing that David Chen's critiques had been more accurate than anyone wanted to admit. Marcus Wu had taken over as Chief Technology Officer, replacing the role Naomi had vacated. Jennifer Park was now Senior Vice President of Security, heading up a dramatically expanded team tasked with ensuring nothing like the conspiracy could ever happen again. And through all of this change, Naomi kept thinking about Ivy, about how a child had accomplished in 2 days what the entire corporate structure had failed to do in years. She'd told the truth and insisted people listen. So when Elena Johnson finally called and asked if Naomi might want to visit, she'd said yes immediately. The house in Westchester was modest by executive standards, but must have felt like a mansion to Elena and Ivy. It had 3 bedrooms, a small yard with a swing set that looked recently installed, and neighbors who apparently had the decency to leave the famous family alone. Naomi arrived on a Saturday afternoon in early June, carrying a gift bag she'd agonized over for days before finally deciding that simple was better than extravagant. Elena met her at the door, and Naomi was struck by how different she looked. The exhaustion that had marked her features during those intense 2 days in the boardroom was gone, replaced by something that looked like peace. She wore jeans and a comfortable sweater, and her smile was genuine and warm. "Dr. Reeves," Elena said, "thank you for coming, and for respecting our privacy these last few weeks." "Please call me Naomi," she replied. "And of course, I can't imagine what the attention has been like." "Overwhelming," Elena admitted, leading her inside. "We had reporters camped outside our old apartment for a week. People recognized Ivy everywhere we went. That's why we moved. We needed space for her to just be a kid again." The house was comfortable and lived in, with children's drawings on the refrigerator and books scattered on the coffee table. Through the back window, Naomi could see Ivy in the yard, pushing a small girl on the swing set. "That's Ivy's friend from school," Elena explained. "Maya. They've known each other since kindergarten. Maya's one of the few kids who treats Ivy exactly the same as she did before all this happened. That's been valuable." "How is Ivy handling everything?" Naomi asked carefully. Elena's expression was complex, pride mixed with worry. "She's resilient, but she's also 8 years old and trying to process things no 8-year-old should have to process. She has nightmares sometimes about the cars all stopping at once, about people getting hurt. The school counselor says it's normal. She experienced trauma, even if it ended well. We're working through it." "I'm so sorry," Naomi said quietly. "She should never have been put in that position. None of it should have happened the way it did." "No," Elena agreed. "It shouldn't have, but it did, and we're dealing with it." She looked at Naomi directly. "The question I have is whether you're dealing with what your company did to my daughter." The words hung in the air, not quite an accusation, but close. Naomi had been expecting this conversation and had promised herself she'd be completely honest. "I think about it every day," Naomi said. "About how we exploited Ivy's gifts because we were desperate. About how Grant put her on camera, turned her into a spectacle, gambled with her dignity because he needed a miracle. About how none of us stopped it because we were all too invested in saving the company." She met Elena's eyes. "I can't undo any of that, but I can tell you that it changed me. Changed how I think about expertise, about listening to warnings, about who we dismiss and who we elevate. And I'm trying to build those lessons into the company's future." Elena studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Ivy wants to see you. She's been asking about you, actually. Wants to know if the cars are really fixed, if people are safe now. I think she needs to know that what she did mattered, that it wasn't just chaos that got resolved and forgotten. It mattered," Naomi said fervently. "Mrs. Johnson, Elena, what Ivy did will be studied for decades. She fundamentally changed how our industry thinks about safety, about security, about where insight can come from. The Ivy Johnson Foundation is already funding research into safety protocols for emerging technologies. Universities are creating scholarships in her name for students interested in technology ethics. She changed everything."
She just wants to know the cars are safe, Elena said softly. Everything else is too big for her to understand, but that she can grasp. Did her work make people safer? Yes, Naomi said without hesitation. Absolutely, yes. Elena called out the window, and a moment later Ivy came bounding inside, her friend Maya following. The little girl stopped short when she saw Naomi, suddenly shy. Hi, Ivy, Naomi said gently. It's good to see you. You look well. Ivy was wearing a bright green t-shirt with a dinosaur on it and had dirt on her knees from playing outside. She looked exactly like what she was, a normal kid having a normal Saturday. But her eyes still carried that too-old awareness, that sense of having seen things most people never see. Hi, Dr. Reeves, Ivy said quietly. Did you fix all the cars? We did, Naomi assured her. Every single bug you found, we fixed. And we added new tests to make sure no new bugs sneak in. The cars are safer now than they've ever been. What about the people who tried to break them? Ivy asked. Are they in jail? 3 of them are, Naomi said. Mr. Kim, Mr. Foster, and Mr. Zhang. They're going to be in jail for a long time. Mr. Chen is helping the police and FBI understand everything that happened, so he might not go to jail for quite as long. But he's being punished for what he did. Even though he was trying to help? Ivy asked. It was the question at the heart of the entire affair, the one that had divided public opinion, sparked endless debates, and defied easy answers. David Chen had broken the law and sabotaged his company, but his stated motivations had been to prevent harm. Was he a criminal or a whistleblower, a saboteur or a safety advocate? Even though he was trying to help, Naomi confirmed. Because, Ivy, sometimes people do wrong things for right reasons, and we still have to hold them accountable for the wrong things, even if we understand why they did them. Mr. Chen could have reported his safety concerns to regulators. He could have quit the company and spoken publicly about his worries. He could have done lots of legal things. But instead, he chose to break the law, and that has consequences. But you're fixing the things he was worried about, Ivy said. So he was right, wasn't he, about the cars not being safe enough? He was, Naomi admitted. It still hurt to say it, but it was true. He was absolutely right. We rushed. We cut corners. We didn't listen when we should have. And that's on us. On me and Mr. Maddox and everyone who was more excited about being first than being safe. So everyone made mistakes, Ivy said. Mr. Chen made mistakes by breaking things, and you made mistakes by not listening. But now everyone is trying to fix their mistakes? That's exactly right, Naomi said. That's the best way to say it. Ivy considered this, her face scrunched in concentration. Then she seemed to decide something and smiled. Okay, that's good. Because my mom always says making mistakes is okay if you learn from them and do better next time. Your mom is very smart, Naomi said, glancing at Elena, who looked close to tears. Maya, who'd been listening to all of this with wide eyes, tugged on Ivy's sleeve. Can we go back outside? I want to try the monkey bars again. Okay, Ivy said. But before she left, she looked back at Naomi. Are you going to keep working on the cars? I am, Naomi said. My job now is to make sure they're always safe, even when people want to rush or cut corners. I'm going to be the person who says no when something isn't safe enough yet. Like Mr. Chen tried to be? Ivy asked. Like Mr. Chen tried to be, Naomi agreed. Except I'm going to do it the right way, by using my position to make change instead of breaking things to prove a point. Ivy nodded gravely, as if this made perfect sense. Then she and Maya disappeared back into the yard, their laughter floating through the window as they returned to the serious business of playing. Elena watched them go, her expression soft. She's going to be okay, she said, as if trying to convince herself. All of this, the attention, the pressure, the trauma, she's going to process it and grow from it and be okay. I believe that, Naomi said. She's remarkable, Elena. Not just because of her pattern recognition or her technical intuition, but because of her emotional intelligence. The way she talked David Chen down from activating that kill switch. I've seen trained negotiators who couldn't have done that. She has a gift for understanding people as well as systems. That scares me sometimes, Elena admitted. She sees too much, understands too much. I worry that she's going to lose her childhood to being Ivy Johnson,
the genius who saved Apex Automotive. I worry that people will only ever see her as that story, not as my daughter who loves dinosaurs and hates broccoli and still believes in the tooth fairy. Then we protect her from that, Naomi said firmly. I brought something for you. She pulled a folder from her bag. This is a proposal for a trust that would be separate from the $100 million. It would be specifically designed to fund whatever Ivy needs: therapy, education, privacy protection, legal representation if the media won't leave her alone. The Ivy Johnson Foundation will oversee it, but you'd have complete control over how it's used. The goal is to give you the resources to let Ivy be a kid for as long as possible, while also preparing for whatever future she chooses. Elena took the folder with trembling hands. Why would you do this? You've already given us more money than I can comprehend. The company doesn't owe us anything else. The money isn't from the company, Naomi said. It's from me, Marcus Wu, Jennifer Park, and about 40 other Apex employees who wanted to contribute. We've put in $1 million to start it, and we'll keep contributing. Because, Elena, we all know what happened in that boardroom. We exploited your daughter's gifts because we were desperate and reckless and more concerned about saving our jobs than protecting a child. That's a debt we can never fully repay. But we can try to make sure Ivy has every resource she needs to build whatever life she wants, free from the burden of what we put on her. Elena's eyes filled with tears. I don't know what to say. Say you'll use it, Naomi said. Say you'll let us help even though we don't deserve the chance. Say you'll give Ivy the childhood she deserves, and if she decides someday that she wants to work in technology or safety or anything else, she'll have the support to do it on her own terms. I'll use it, Elena whispered. Thank you. Thank you so much. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching through the window as Ivy and Maya played. The normalcy of it, two kids on a sunny afternoon finding joy in simple things, felt almost surreal after everything that had happened. Can I ask you something? Elena said eventually. That first night, when Grant Maddox offered Ivy the $100 million, was he serious? Or was it just a desperate gamble, and he would have found a way to back out if Ivy had failed? Naomi had wondered the same thing, and had eventually asked Maddox directly. His answer had been characteristically complicated. He was serious in the moment, Naomi said carefully. But I think if Ivy had failed, he would have convinced himself that the offer didn't really count because she hadn't actually solved anything. He'd have paid something, maybe a few million as a consultation fee, but not the full amount. Grant's good at rationalizing decisions that serve his interests. She paused. But Ivy didn't fail. She succeeded beyond anyone's wildest expectations. And once the cameras captured him making that promise to the world, he couldn't back out, even if he wanted to. The money is real, Elena. It's contracted, it's guaranteed, and it'll be in your accounts within the next few months. What happens to the company now? Elena asked. To Grant Maddox and everyone who made those mistakes you talked about? The company is being rebuilt, Naomi said. New leadership structure, new safety protocols, new oversight. Grant is still CEO, but he's on a much shorter leash now. The board has made it clear that one more scandal, one more corner cut, and he's done. As for everyone who made mistakes, we're all trying to do better. Some people left because they couldn't handle the scrutiny or the changes, but most of us stayed because we believe we can turn this into something good. And Toyota? Elena asked. Are they going to face consequences? They're drowning in lawsuits, Naomi said with some satisfaction. Civil suits from Apex, criminal investigations from multiple governments, regulatory sanctions from safety agencies around the world. Their autonomous vehicle program has been suspended indefinitely. Several executives are facing criminal charges. It's going to take them years to recover, if they ever do. And the best part? Every settlement they pay, every fine they face, it's all based on evidence that Ivy helped us find. Her pattern recognition didn't just save Apex, it exposed one of the biggest corporate espionage conspiracies in modern history. Elena shook her head in wonder. My daughter did that. My 8-year-old daughter who still asks me to check under her bed for monsters. She's remarkable, Naomi said. But Elena, please, let her be 8. Let her check for monsters and play with friends and do badly in subjects she doesn't like and have no responsibilities beyond homework and chores. She's earned a normal childhood. That's the plan, Elena said, though her school wants to skip her ahead 2 grades, And we've had offers from private schools and gifted programs, and everyone wants to study her or teach her or make her into some kind of prodigy. It's exhausting. Say no to all of it, Naomi advised. Let her learn at her own pace, with kids her own age. If she wants to accelerate later when she's older and can make that choice herself, that's fine. But right now, she needs stability and normalcy more than she needs advanced placement. That's what I think too, Elena said, relief evident in her voice. But it helps to hear it from someone else. Sometimes I worry I'm holding her back, limiting her potential. You're protecting her, Naomi interrupted firmly. There's a difference. Ivy will have opportunities her entire life. She doesn't need to rush into them at 8 years old. They talked for another hour about practical things. The trust fund details, the foundation's plans, the ongoing legal proceedings, the media requests that hadn't stopped. Naomi shared what she could about Apex's rebuilding efforts and promised to keep Elena updated on any developments that might affect Ivy. Eventually, it was time to leave. Naomi said goodbye to Elena, then walked out to the yard where Ivy was still playing with Maya. Ivy, she called gently, I'm heading out, but I wanted to give you something. Ivy came over, curious. Naomi pulled a small box from the gift bag she'd brought. This is for you, she said. It's not fancy or expensive, but I thought you might like it. Ivy opened the box carefully. Inside was a simple compass, the old-fashioned kind with a needle that always pointed north. A compass helps you find direction when you're lost, Naomi explained. When I was your age, my grandfather gave me one just like this. He said that in life, sometimes you'll be in situations where everyone is telling you to go different directions, and it's hard to know which way is right. But if you have something that always points true, something inside you that knows which way is north, you'll be okay. Ivy held the compass carefully, watching the needle settle. What's my north? She asked. I think your north is truth, Naomi said. You see patterns that other people miss. You tell the truth even when it's uncomfortable. You care about people being safe and things being fair. That's your north, Ivy. Whenever you're confused or scared or people are pulling you in different directions, remember that. Follow your truth. Ivy looked up at her with those enormous brown eyes. Will you come visit again? She asked. I like talking to you. I'd love to, Naomi said, if your mom says it's okay. It's okay, Elena called from the doorway. Naomi smiled. Then yes, I'll come visit again. And Ivy, if you ever want to see the work we're doing at Apex, the safety protocols, the new testing systems, any of it, you just let your mom know. You're always welcome. Not because we want to use your gifts, but because you have a right to see how your work changed things. Okay, Ivy said. Then, impulsively, she hugged Naomi. It was quick and slightly awkward, the way 8-year-olds hug, but it made Naomi's throat tight with emotion. Thank you for fixing the cars, Ivy whispered. For real this time. Thank you for showing us they needed fixing, Naomi whispered back. As Naomi drove away from the house in Westchester, watching it shrink in her rearview mirror, she felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. Not the desperate hope of crisis, but the genuine hope that comes from seeing a problem solved right. 3 months later, the first Apex vehicles rolled out with the new safety certifications. They'd been tested more rigorously than any autonomous vehicles in history. Independent safety boards had verified every system. And prominently displayed on each vehicle's interface was a small logo, a simple compass, with the words, Ivy Johnson Safety Standard. It had been Maddox's idea, surprisingly. He'd proposed it at a board meeting, arguing that the company needed to constantly remind itself of the lessons learned. Some board members had worried it would keep the scandal fresh in people's minds. But Maddox had insisted. That's exactly the point, he'd said. We should never forget what happened when we prioritized speed over safety. That logo is a reminder, a promise. And yeah, maybe it's also a little bit of penance. We owe that kid more than money. We owe her the commitment to never make those mistakes again. The board had agreed, and now every Apex vehicle carried Ivy's legacy. The Ivy Johnson Foundation grew quickly, funded by the settlement money from Toyota's civil suit and ongoing contributions from Apex employees and other tech workers who'd been moved by the story. It funded safety research, supported whistleblowers, and advocated for stronger oversight of emerging technologies. Elena served on the board, ensuring that her daughter's name was used to actually help people rather than just generate publicity. David Chen's trial became a landmark case about corporate responsibility and whistleblowing. He ultimately served 3 years in federal prison for his role in the conspiracy, a relatively light sentence that reflected the court's acknowledgement of his safety concerns. Upon his release, he became a prominent advocate for technology ethics, speaking at universities and corporations about the dangers of prioritizing profit over safety. He never worked in corporate technology again, but his voice became influential in shaping how the industry thought about responsible innovation. Kim, Foster, and Zhang received much harsher sentences, 12 to 15 years each, with no acknowledgement of mitigating factors. They'd stolen for profit, not principle, and the courts made an example of them. Toyota eventually settled the civil suit for $32 billion, the largest intellectual property theft settlement in history. Half went to Apex. The other half was distributed to various safety organizations and research institutions, as specified in the settlement terms that Apex's lawyers had negotiated specifically to ensure the money would be used to improve autonomous vehicle safety industry-wide. And Ivy? Ivy went to 4th grade. She joined the school chess club and discovered she liked it. She struggled with cursive handwriting and had to practice extra. She developed a passionate interest in marine biology after a class trip to an aquarium. She fought with her best friend Maya over something silly and made up 2 days later. She lost a tooth and found $5 under her pillow and used it to buy a book about octopuses. She was, in other words, exactly what she should have been, a kid. But once a month, on Saturday afternoons, Naomi would visit. They'd talk about patterns, sometimes in code, sometimes in nature, sometimes in stories or music or art. They'd talk about the responsibility that came with seeing things other people missed. They'd talk about how to use gifts wisely, how to know when to speak up and when to stay silent, how to navigate a world that would always want to use you for what you could do rather than value you for who you were. And every time Naomi left, she felt grateful. Grateful that Ivy had the mother she had. Grateful that the little girl was being protected and nurtured. Grateful that she'd been given the chance to learn from someone 40 years younger than her about what really mattered. 5 years later, when Ivy was 13, she wrote an essay for her 8th grade English class. The assignment was to write about a moment that changed your life. Most kids wrote about moving to a new town or their parents' divorce or making a sports team. Ivy wrote about the 2 days she'd spent in a corporate boardroom, finding patterns in code and people, learning that adults didn't always have answers and that speaking truth could change everything. Her teacher, who knew Ivy's history but had respected her family's desire for normal treatment, gave her an A and sent a copy to Elena with a note. Your daughter has wisdom that most people spend lifetimes trying to find. Thank you for sharing her with the world, even when it cost you both so much. Elena framed the essay and hung it in Ivy's room next to the compass Naomi had given her all those years ago. The essay ended with a paragraph that Naomi would later have printed and mounted in her office at Apex, a reminder of why they did what they did. My mom tells me that I saved a lot of people that week, but I don't think I saved anyone. I think I just told the truth about what I saw, and other people decided to listen. The real heroes were the people who could have ignored me because I was just a kid, but didn't. The people who could have kept making mistakes because admitting them was hard, but didn't. The people who could have chosen money over safety, but didn't. I just showed them the pattern. They're the ones who decided to fix it, and I think that's how it's supposed to work. We all see different pieces of the truth, and when we share them honestly and listen to each other even when it's uncomfortable, we can fix things together. That's not saving people. That's just being human. But maybe being human, really being human, that's the hardest and most important thing we can do. Out of the mouths of babes, Naomi thought every time she read it. Out of the mouths of babes. 20 years after the events in the Maddox Tower boardroom, Ivy Johnson completed her doctorate in systems safety engineering. Her dissertation, Pattern Recognition in Complex Systems, Applications for Predictive Failure Analysis, became required reading in engineering programs worldwide. She turned down lucrative offers from every major tech company and instead accepted a position at the Ivy Johnson Foundation, the organization that bore her name and carried her legacy. Her first major initiative was establishing a fellowship program for unconventional thinkers, people from backgrounds that didn't include prestigious universities or traditional credentials, people who saw the world differently and might catch patterns that trained experts missed. People like she'd been at 8 years old, except now she could give them opportunities to use their gifts without exploitation. Elena Johnson, retired from cleaning offices and living comfortably on the investments made from that long-ago $100 million, attended her daughter's first public speech as the Foundation's Director of Safety Innovation. She watched Ivy, now 28, confident, brilliant, still carrying that core of compassion that had defined her since childhood, address a room full of engineers and executives and regulators. "My mother taught me to see what's wrong and say so," Ivy told them. "To trust patterns even when they don't make sense yet. To believe that people can choose to do better even after they've done worse. Everything I learned about safety, about innovation, about responsibility, I learned it by watching my mom work 3 jobs to give me opportunities, and by watching what happened when a company forgot that their technology was supposed to serve people, not profit." She paused, her eyes scanning the crowd until they found Naomi Reeves, now retired but still attending every Foundation event, still carrying guilt and gratitude in equal measure. "But I also learned that people can change," Ivy continued, "that companies can learn from their mistakes, that admitting you were wrong and doing better is more important than protecting your pride. Apex Automotive could have doubled down, could have hidden their problems, could have sacrificed safety for survival. But they didn't. They chose accountability. And that choice, that's what I want this foundation to promote. Not just finding problems, but creating environments where people feel safe identifying problems, where organizations reward honesty over convenience, where we measure success not just in profits or innovation, but in lives protected and futures secured." The applause was thunderous. And in the back of the room, Elena Johnson cried quietly, thinking about a sick 8-year-old girl who'd gone to work with her mother one desperate night and somehow changed the world. Not because she was a genius, though she was. Not because she was fearless, though she tried to be. But because she'd seen a pattern that no one else could see. And she'd had the courage to say so. Because she'd believed, with the faith of a child, that adults would listen if you just told them the truth clearly enough. Because she'd understood that behind every line of code, every system, every vehicle, there were real people whose lives mattered more than quarterly earnings or competitive advantages or corporate pride. That night, after all the speeches and celebrations, after the Foundation Gala had ended and the guests had gone home, Ivy sat with her mother in the quiet of their home, still in Westchester, still modest despite the wealth they'd been given. "Did I do okay?" Ivy asked, 28 years old, but still seeking her mother's approval the way she had at 8. "You did more than okay," Elena said softly. "You did exactly what you've always done. You told the truth with love. You held people accountable while giving them hope they could do better. That's your gift, Ivy. Not just seeing patterns in code, but seeing patterns in people, knowing what they need to hear to change." "I learned that from you," Ivy said. "From watching you work jobs that people look down on, but doing them with dignity. From watching you fight for me to have a normal childhood, even when everyone wanted to turn me into something else. From watching you choose what was right over what was easy every single day." They sat in comfortable silence, mother and daughter, 2 people whose lives had been irrevocably changed by events neither could have predicted, but both had survived with grace. On the mantel, the old compass Naomi had given Ivy still sat in its place of honor. The needle still pointed north, still true after all these years. And somewhere in the world, millions of people traveled safely in vehicles built with the Ivy Johnson safety standard, most of them never knowing the story behind the logo. Never knowing that their safety had been secured by an 8-year-old girl in a worn purple jacket who'd seen patterns where everyone else saw noise, who'd spoken truth when silence would have been easier, who'd proven that expertise could come from the most unexpected places if people were willing to listen. The story of Ivy Johnson and Apex Automotive became a case study in business schools, a cautionary tale about corporate hubris, and a hopeful story about redemption. It was taught in engineering programs as an example of why safety must come first. It was discussed in ethics classes as a complex narrative about whistleblowing and accountability. But the real story, the true story, was simpler than any of those academic analyses. It was about a mother who loved her daughter enough to bring her to work when she had no other choice. It was about a little girl who saw something wrong and had the courage to say so. It was about adults who could have dismissed her but chose to listen. It was about a company that could have collapsed but chose to change. It was about people making better choices, one difficult decision at a time. And in the end, that was all any of them could do. See the patterns, speak the truth, listen with humility, change with courage, protect what mattered,
And trust that being human, really being human, with all the mistakes and redemptions that entailed, was enough. It had to be enough.
because out of the mouths of babes came not just wisdom, but hope. And hope, as it turned out, was the pattern that connected everything else, the pattern that always pointed north, the pattern that made all the other patterns worth finding.